7:00. Let's see, some announcements. Meetings being broadcast on local cable TV and recorded for rebroadcast on the local cable channels and on the internet. Meetings accessible by remote participation. Oh, yeah, she's on there.
What's that?
It was on there. Meetings also accessible by remote participation. Instructions at the bottom of the agenda. West Newbury is a Purple Heart community, and today is Purple Heart Day. There's the proclamation that we signed last year in the packet. Now, therefore, be it proclaimed, we, the West Newbury Select Board, hereby proclaim West Newbury, Massachusetts, a Purple Heart community, honoring the service and sacrifice of those from our community who were awarded the Purple Heart while serving in our nation's wars. So, be it also proclaimed that West Newbury Mass will recognize August 7th annually as Purple Heart Day and urge our citizens and organizations to display the American flag as well as other public expressions of recognition and appreciation of our Purple Heart recipients. The next item, the next announcement is the 2023 concert series. We have 2 concerts left. Those are Thursdays at 6:30. It's an upcoming planning board meeting.
Actually, Wendy, sorry to interrupt, but I heard from the town planner this afternoon that due to a heavy at the planning board on August 15th, they pushed back the consultant presentation of the draft concept planning to their September 5th meeting.
Oh, okay. So this is the results of the workshops and everything.
Yeah, it's conceptual planning for the 3 sites or areas that were identified.
What's the date?
September 5th. Unfortunately, conflicts with the select board.
Yeah, that's the
That's
day.
the one I called it.
Okay, the next announcement, fall special town meeting warrant closes Tuesday, September 5th. Proposed warrant articles must be submitted to the town clerk's office no later than Thursday, August 31st. Blank article request forms are posted online and available, and everybody needs to fill out the appropriate paperwork so that we can have a consistent and streamlined process. Call for volunteers. There are still FY24 positions on boards, commissions, and committees. It's on the homepage of the town website under volunteer. You can also subscribe for email town agendas and announcements on the homepage. And a final announcement, a staff note that Kate Cove just completed her 50th year of employment with the town of West Newbury. She started June 1st, 1973. And she's been to the town since then. So that's truly a remarkable accomplishment. We, Rebecca, the executive assistant to town manager, made up a certificate, and we're going to frame it and bring it over to the library. She did not want to participate tonight. So if you see her around, it'd be nice to say thank you to her for many years of service. Under regular business, one note that agenda item K, review of the draft solar feasibility study, is going to be delayed to our next meeting. The Energy and Sustainability Committee reviewed the document and had some comments, and so we have an updated version that we haven't reviewed yet. So that will be in 2 weeks. Item A, request for special event permit. This is for local sports for the Harborside Half Marathon. We have somebody here. Yeah.
Yes, hi, my name's Eric Boucher.
Hi, how are you?
Good. How are you all?
Good. So I think the last time there were some questions about police detail requirements and also a map with the water stations. I think those are the follow-up items. And it looks like that's all completed, right? Did either of you have any other questions or comments?
No, I think
Chris, go ahead. I know you have something to say.
first of all, the presentation was excellent.
Yeah.
He's got 5 police stations, which seems a little excessive to me. But then within our own policy on events, I started reading about the police detail. And I think we somewhere have to clean it up, because it talks about any outdoor function, minimum 2 police and 1 for every 100 guests. So if you had a race coming through town with 1,000 people, you'd be 10. Doesn't make sense.
Well, there won't be 1,000 people in town at one time, though.
It's the event. I'm just saying, I think it has to get cleaned up in the policy. That's all.
Do you have specific concerns about this particular?
No,
level of
I
policing?
think his is exceptional. I think he's over the top with what he said.
Okay. Any other comments, Rick?
No,
Questions? Are you happy with the map?
I am, yeah, I think that's good.
Okay, all right. Somebody want to make a motion?
Sure, move that we, approve the special event permit for local sports. LLC and Ventures Endurance, for the, half marathon and 5K on November 12th, 2023.
Second. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Great, thanks. You're all set, Eric.
Thank you very much, everybody.
Thanks, Eric.
Have a good night.
That's what about Apple Harvest? They're gonna come back too, but didn't.
They're not ready yet. Yeah. Item B, request for appointment. We have several appointments here. The first is for Conservation Commission Associate Member. Haley? Haley here?
Good evening.
Hi,
I
how
am.
are you?
Good. How are you?
So you decided not to go with FinCom, huh?
Is that gonna hold me back here?
No, no, we want you to do what speaks to you. It sounds like conservation is what speaks to you, right?
It does very much so, yes. And happy to I don't know if anyone new if I needed to share a bit more about my background, but happy to talk through that or answer any questions if needed.
Do we have any questions?
No, we saw our background in the last meeting, and I just, it's very good.
Yeah, so, sorry about the full court press on the FinCom.
Not a problem. Not a problem
Yeah.
at all.
So do you have any questions about the associate member position? That's typically a year.
Yep. Yeah, no questions. I was able to ask a couple earlier this week, so I feel pretty good about the path forward.
Okay, great. Motion.
Sure. Yeah,
Make a motion to appoint Halen McCraven to the associate position on the Concom.
For a one-year term.
Term.
Second, any further discussion? All those in favor? Aye.
aye,
All right, thank you.
Thank you very
Haley.
much, Halen.
thanks, Helen.
Thank you so much, guys. Have a
All
good
right,
evening. Take
Haley,
care.
You'll hear from the town clerk's office to see about getting you sworn in.
Excellent. Okay, looking forward to it. Thank you. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
The next item was CPC members. Angus pointed out to me that we do not need to appoint those. I thought this was an oversight from our past meeting. We already voted for me to represent the select board. Is that right? Do you recall? I'm pretty sure for me to represent the select board and the CPC. That was when we reorganized.
Yeah, I think we did.
Yeah. So, so we can just pass over this item. These other people were, appointed by their boards, so we don't need to do that. Item C, Anna Sullivan, application for appointment to FinCom. Would you like to give a brief history of your?
Well, but I would first like to just comment on the fact that when a certain Wendy Reed first walked in here to volunteer for a position, it was for the playground committee, I believe. And we looked at her resume and said, "Are you insane?" The water department and the water commissioners are in desperate need. Oh, and so we strung on her into
Now we're happy.
So thank you, Haley. Yes, Anna Sullivan, Ash Street, West Newbury. I've been on various boards and committees over the years. And I understood that there was a need on the finance committee. So with my CPA background and long history in town, I thought I would volunteer to fill out that open spot.
CPA in this case being certified public.
And they're not, there's another story to that, there's another story to that, because when we got the CPA Act passed, and I was still on the board, and there was some aggravated person who, when they got their tax bill, said, "What CPA is getting this money from my taxes?" It's like, no, that was not the case at all. There was no graft or corruption while I was on the board.
Okay.
Great, so I would move that we, I'd move that we to appoint Anna Sullivan
Thank you.
to the FinCom. I didn't look at the term.
About 3 years.
Two vacancies.
Yeah, I thought.
Well, it's a 3-year term.
I would go for the 3-year.
Okay, so sounds good.
Lock her in.
That's right, you're in there.
Yes,
You're
okay.
3 years in. So for a term running through June 30th, 2026.
Sure.
Second, further discussion? I have to ask a question. Is it your intention to serve out that term?
It is my intention, and as you know, I've had a merger with my firm. And this last tax season was not really pleasant, but I expect that with 1 year under my belt, the change in software, I should be able to fulfill the obligations.
Great. You can hear that.
Thank you for doing it.
Sure.
You'd be great. Yeah, I wish I was back there.
You can always bet me.
I didn't say that, you did.
All right, all in favor? Thanks, Ann.
Thank you, guys.
All right, and again, the town clerk's office will be in touch to see about getting sworn.
Okay.
Item E, when we appointed Alejandra to the Conservation Commission last meeting, we did not set a term. And so that's kind of a housekeeping item. I think I would like to set it to be a year rather than 3 years, given that the division's in flux right now, and give her a chance to get her feet under her. If that is appropriate for.
Well, the term that she's filling, what would be the natural end of that term?
It would have been a 3-year term. But we can appoint. whatever we want to give them.
Okay, it was interesting in reading this here, and Angus, you've actually pointed this out.
Being what?
We're talking about the Conservation Commission.
Oh, the
Right,
next
sure,
item.
Oh, okay.
I think he's into the Concom charge discussion, Rick, is that what you're?
Right, yeah. Okay, so
You're jumping ahead.
okay, my apologies.
Yeah, so this is just a housekeeping item.
I'm in a hurry.
Okay, all right, so, I mean, that would be my suggestion. If you guys are all right with that. And then we would need a motion.
Make a motion that we define the term of Alejandra as 1-year term on the Concom appointment.
All right, second. All those in favor?
And just for clarification, that would be through June 30th of 2024.
2024, yes. I don't believe she's been sworn in yet.
She hasn't, she reached out to me today.
Okay.
I told her to reach out to Jim and that they were talking about it. You were talking about it tonight.
Okay.
Jim would probably get in touch tomorrow either way.
Okay, he's out of town for this week, so.
And that's-
Max will be in touch, yeah.
All right.
Okay, all right, all those in favor?
Who made the second?
I did. Okay, the next item is C, presentation from.
Oh, we did have the investment policy committee.
Oh,
The board's designee,
All right, that wasn't in here.
and that
So,
committee is
that's-
meeting this Thursday. evening.
Yeah, that's also a housekeeping item. When we made our other appointments, we did not appoint one of us to the investment policy committee. Seems like a natural fit for you, Chris. It's something that we would like to do, or Rick, do you have a burning desire to be?
I do not.
Okay.
I was thinking it should be Wendy because it'll be the only committee in town that I want.
All right.
No, I would like to do it, but I have a commitment this Thursday. I'll try and get out of it.
Mhm.
Yeah, I'd like to do it.
Okay, if you can, I can attend on your behalf. Just to.
If you'll have to.
Yeah. All right. So I move to have Chris Weil represent the select board on the investment policy committee.
Sorry.
Those in favor?
Aye.
Great, thank you, Angus, for
Thank you.
not letting me pass the room. Okay. All right, now we're on to the invasive species interns. Do you have that presentation?
I sure do, yeah.
Well,
Do you want to introduce yourself then?
excuse me, just a second, so this is, what's the item number now?
We are now on item C. That was a separate, it was a
Okay.
large presentation, so it's a separate document.
Okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Do you want the interference if you'd like to go up to the podium?
You don't have to. I think we can hear you. Well, actually, maybe if you're in the back. You think
Yeah, I think it'd be better if presenters came up, and then once you finish your initial introduction, I will pull up the slides and do a screen share for those who are on Zoom.
It's not Stacy.
No, well, she's.
Oh, yeah. With somebody's with her.
Mhm. Let us know what you've been working on.
Well, good evening. My name is Emily Claire. I'm one of the invasive plant interns, and we're here to talk about the invasive plant internship, what we've been doing over this past few months.
I'm Stacey Dolan, I'm the other intern. We do have an introductory slide that introduces.
Oh, great.
So we could go to that as well.
Like I said, I'm Emily Claire, a rising fourth year at Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute, and I'm studying environmental science and sustainability studies.
I'm Stacey Dolan. I am a second career wildlife biologist. I got my master's from Clemson in 2021, and I'm pursuing a career path of research with endangered species. Next slide. Okay, so I will start by going over our three main objectives for this internship. The first main objective is to continue mapping from 2022. It was Kevin and Dan who began this project last year, mapping invasive species on the town-owned parcels. We continued that for several weeks this summer. The purpose of that is to inform management decisions. Our second main objective was to validate and expand upon their data set. And the reason for that is because as we started the management, which is our third main objective, we discovered that a lot of the invasives were not visible upon first glance until you started removing like the outer layer essentially of the invasives, and there were a lot more underneath. So we built upon their data set and validated what was there for the sites that they had previously mapped. And then the third main objective is to begin management. So this season was the first season that we did a lot of management. We started in early July, and we've been managing for the bulk of our season. And the two main sites that we've been working at are Cherry Hill Reservoir and Quaker Cemetery. Next slide, please. So there were 22 species that we focused on this summer, although we did not find 3 of those, pale swallowwort, giant knotweed, and Bohemian knotweed. The main species that we did find this summer are oriental bittersweet, multiflora rose, glossy buckthorn, and bush honeysuckle, and autumn olive as well. Next slide, please. So I wanted to go over some common traits that invasive species tend to share, and they are the reason for why they are invasive and so noxious. So some of the shared traits include reading up earlier in the season than native plants. They also tend to hold on to their foliage later into the fall, and that gives them an advantage of a larger growing season, being able to grow larger and store more carbohydrates into their roots. They tend to be prolific seed producers, upwards of 1 million seeds for some species for an individual plant. They also tend to have a very rapid growth rate and reach sexual maturity at an earlier age than a lot of natives do. They do tend to have a very high germination rate, around 90% for a lot of them. They are very tolerant of shade, so they can grow up through a really dense canopy, even where there's very little light. They also tolerate very poor site conditions, so low moisture, poor nutrient soils, things like that. They also tend to reproduce through several different modes, so sexually through flowering, but also vegetatively, which is clonal reproduction. And they tend to form dense monocultural stands, and that prevents natives from being able to harness any sunlight, and they ultimately can die off, and that leads to loss of biodiversity. Next slide. So just to go into a little bit further detail of some of the more common ones that we saw this summer, these are the reasons why we should care about these species. So oriental bittersweet, I think most people are probably familiar with it. It's along the roadways almost everywhere. It can climb up to 60 feet up into the canopy of trees. It can actually uproot trees from its weight, and it girdles trees and constricts nutrient flow and water flow through the trees, so it can kill trees. It is both insect and wind pollinated, so it doesn't need an insect to pollinate it. It can just be pollinated through wind. It has a very high germination rate in low light, and it reproduces sexually and vegetatively. So it reproduces through layering, which is where the tips of the branch touch the soil and it can send out new roots, and that can become an independent plant. And it also can reproduce through root severing, which is where the roots will send up new shoots adjacent to the mother plant essentially, and that can be an independent plant as well. One of the problems with it is that if you are treating bittersweet through pulling, if there's even a very small root fragment that remains in the soil, that can send up new root shoots. So it's very hard to completely eradicate it through pulling. And it produces prolific berries, like most invasives. So multiflora rose, similarly can climb up to 15 feet. It creates impenetrable thickets. It was actually encouraged by the USDA to be used for living fence lines for agriculture, because livestock can't even penetrate it. So that is why it became so common in the Northeast and the Midwest. It can produce from a single mature plant 500,000 to 1 million seeds per year, and those seeds can remain viable in the seed bank for 20 years. So that is one of the reasons that it's so problematic. The rose hips from multiflora are smaller than the native ones, and so they're more readily handled by birds and dispersed. And they also reproduce sexually and vegetatively. Layering is very common for multiflora because of its arched growth habit. The tips of the branches frequently touch the ground and they will send out new roots and become a new plant. And lastly, autumn olive. We have encountered that very extensively at Cherry Hill Reservoir. It is a woody shrub that can grow 20 feet tall by 30 feet wide. It also has a very arched growth habit. It produces a large amount of very fleshy berries that are kind of, they sort of resemble honeysuckle berries. They will send a lot of suckers up year after year. So cutting them can take several years to kill off the roots. It's very resilient plant to treat through cutting. It produces seeds very early, at as young as 3 years, and that is important for a slide that we'll talk about in a few minutes. And also it produces a large quantity of berries, about 30 pounds from a mature plant or 66,000 seeds.
Is that in a year or a lifetime?
That's per season.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. Next slide.
Work against.
Yeah, it's a lot. So this slide is, it's a little bit sciencey, but I just wanted to cover some like qualitative reasons for why we should care. Looking at impacts up the trophic level. So impacts to birds, impacts to mammals and reptiles and pollinators. So looking at the left portion of the slide, this was a study that was done by Sarah Wagner during her dissertation. She now is an ornithologist for the Cornell Lab of Ornithology. So what she looked at was the range of vegetative habitat from fully native to fully invasive, so the full spectrum. So that's the invasive index that is on the, that doesn't work there, that's fine. I have a laser pointer, don't worry. On the x-axis, the horizontal axis. And on the y-axis in that chart is the occupancy of different species. She looked at a lot of different species. This is just two for an example. But the occupancy is the presence or absence of the bird, basically the frequency of the time that you find it in that habitat. So from 0% to 100%. So what you'll notice is that the curve declines. So as invasives are more dominant in a habitat, the bird abundance goes down. And so the system that she looked at in particular had a complete loss of yellow warblers and black-capped chickadees as the invasive index went up to 100%. So to expand on that, so birds and insects happen to be the most strongly affected taxa by invasive plants. Caterpillars are highly specialized to their host plant, and so they can't just live on any plant, they need a very specific one, and if that's not present, they can't complete their life cycle. Going up a trophic level from that, birds feed their chicks caterpillars essentially, and so they can't eat seeds, they can't eat berries, and so if there aren't caterpillars, then the birds can't reproduce and sustain their populations. Berries also are of invasives tend to be very sugary and very low in fat, and birds tend to need fatty berries to be able to survive their migration if they're migratory, or if they're resident to be able to sustain themselves through a cold winter. So it also affects the adult birds, and certain ones completely drop out of the guild at a certain threshold of invasives. And then moving on to look at the effects to mammals and reptiles. So this chart on the right is showing a whole bunch of different taxa that they examined. It was a meta-analysis of 198 different studies. So those are the different taxa on the right, and the impacts are on that graph. So the ones I wanted to highlight are, if you look at the abundance of the animals, reptiles are most strongly negatively impacted by invasives. And bird diversity is most strongly impacted by invasives. and bird fitness, as well as insect fitness, and fitness is a measure of reproductive success, are most strongly negatively impacted by invasives. So these are just some examples of like measurable effects that invasives have on different taxa. And of note, I wanted to mention that West Newbury has a lot of landings turtles habitat, like Cherry Hill, for example. And so we've noticed that the abundance of reptiles is the one that is most strongly impacted by invasives. And so that is relevant to that. Next slide, please. Okay, so now I'm going to get into what we actually did this summer. So we started the season with mapping. We wanted to walk through what EdMaps looks like. So EdMaps is the software that we use. It stands for Early Detection and Distribution Mapping System. And so this is a screenshot of what the mapping system will look like. It's publicly available, it's free, so anybody can use this if they want to use it on their own land. And so we wanted to just walk you through it because it's pretty simple software. So the advantages of it are that it bundles spatial data, such as the location of the invasive and the coverage, the extent of the area that it covers, with qualitative data as well. So whether it is a mature plant or a seedling, the density of it, the abundance, things like that. And this data is all publicly available, so it can help lead to better management of invasives because anyone can access this data. Although if you're doing it on your own private property, you can select private, there's a tick box for it. So if you're concerned about that. All of the data points are validated by approved verifiers. And so there's a picture that you include in your data point. And so an expert gets to verify that so that everything is valid that's in this data set. And you can export it and use any GIS software to manipulate it if you want to do further analysis. So next slide. So we're going to walk you through just a quick case study of Quaker Cemetery. It's a very low-level invasive site that's very small. That's great for a case study to just show you how the mapping software works. So we initially visited this site on July 11th, and we mapped it and then marked all of the invasive plants with flagging tape. Elisa Grammer returned on the 19th to do an initial removal of all those invasives, and then we returned on the 27th to validate the data, make sure everything was removed, remove anything that remained, and then mark all of the data as treated. So this middle picture here shows what is a screenshot of EdMaps. So it just shows the landing page. If you wanted to create a new observation, you would click that little plus sign that's in the lower right corner. When you do that, it pops up the screen that's on your right there. You select the species and it is state specific. You choose your state, so it'll have just the invasive for your state. Use the little camera icon to add a photo of it, and that's what will be used to verify it. Next slide, please. This on the left shows the qualitative data that is coupled with that spatial location and a little thumbnail of the picture, and then that is just a larger image on the right, so you can see that is what the verifiers use to validate the data. That's a small glossy buckthorn seedling at Quaker Hill. Next slide, please. Quaker Cemetery, sorry. So when we returned on the 27th, there were just about a dozen very small seedlings that were remaining. So we pulled those out and then we logged back into EdMaps and revised all of the data points to move them from positive, meaning presence of the invasive, to treated. And then there's also negative as well. If you return in subsequent years and it has been eradicated, you can select negative. So you can change the data throughout time, and that shows you the current status of invasives in any area. Next slide. And the last thing I wanted to talk about very quickly was just a mapping challenge that we ran into this summer. Emily's iPad had issues with uploading the observations from her queue that was within the app to the server on EdMaps. So we worked with the Newbury IT department with Jake and reached out to UGA to try to resolve it. And we didn't get it resolved through the app. So we manually transcribed all of the data that was on Emily's iPad over to mine and uploaded it. So we managed to get everything that we observed uploaded, and it didn't set us back too long, just about a half day of work. So it wasn't too bad. And now Emily's going to talk about our management.
Okay, so if you could go to the next slide, please. Like we said, one of our main objectives this summer was management. This was the first time we've been doing management for this program. And we operated mostly at Cherry Hill and Quaker Cemetery parcels. So the management methods that we used were mostly mechanical removal. So kind of what people do in their everyday lives. So cutting, sawing, uprooting, hand pulling. of these invasive species. And the equipment we used was provided by the town of West Newbury. So we use large loppers, hand pruners, hand saws, the extractivator for uprooting things, and the buckthorn bags. So with the removed plant material, at Cherry Hill, we collected them into brush piles for spring burning. So if you've driven by the area, you have seen these giant brush piles of all the invasive species that we've removed there. And for Quaker Cemetery, we collected all the plant material and moved it off site. And another key factor within management is making sure that all the updated observations on EDMAPs are updated to treated to help with further monitoring and further management and treatment. If you could go to the next slide. So like I said, this was our first year doing management. So we have learned like many different tips and tricks and how to effectively manage a lot of these invasives. Both myself and Stacy used the extractivator for the first time, which is helpful for uprooting, since many of the invasives, if you try to pull up directly vertically, you can't do it. So the extractivator allows for an extra pivot point to kind of pull it up at an angle. And what we learned is that the extractivator works mostly on small woody shrubs. So your bush honeysuckles, privet, burning bush, and sometimes buckthorn, as seen in the picture. And it functionally works by uprooting all the roots of the plant. Unlike on vines such as bittersweet or Japanese honeysuckle or multiflora rose, where it just kind of snaps off at the stem and the roots are still in the ground and the invasive has not been removed, unfortunately. So this is very helpful moving forward for the future interns to know which method works best for which plants. If you could go to the next slide. Similar to mapping, we kind of wanted to have a case study for management, focused area of where we have been managing. So we have Cherry Hill, that was one of our main management areas. As you can see, we've kind of been working in the highlighted area on the field edges. And the methods that we've been using is working on field edges and kind of moving from tree to tree, removing invasives from each tree, and then also removing the invasives in between. And we've been going about 50 to 60 feet deep from the field edge. If you could go to the next slide. So on trees, this is an example of a tree that we worked on. So there is the sugar maple buried under all that bittersweet. I promise we'll get there. But as you can see, or you can't see, the sugar maple is not doing well. The bittersweet has essentially taken over this maple and used it as scaffolding to get better light and outcompete other species in the area. It should be noted that many branches from the sugar maple were completely broken off, and the bittersweet was kind of using its dead limbs to kind of climb up and get more sunlight. If you could go to the next slide. This was mid-treatment, halfway through treatment. You can see in the front, those are all bittersweet vines that Stacy and I cut using loppers and hand saws. As you can see, these bittersweet vines were very thick and very big and difficult to cut through. So it took quite a lot of manpower to get through that. It took about 2 days to get this tree completely removed from bittersweet. And if you can kind of see in this picture, it was so dense that me and Stacy could sit inside that little gap in there and be completely shaded. It was like a little dome or a little tent. If you go to the next picture, this is the sugar maple completely treated. You can see that it's complete, all the bittersweet has been removed. So hopefully the sugar maple, without all the extra weight of the bittersweet, will thrive in this time. Yeah, it was a lot. And you can also see in the area around the sugar maple that there's no other native species growing there because it was just all bittersweet in that area. If you go to the next slide, this is another tree that we worked on. It's an ash tree. Again, it has been completely overwrought by vines and just completely taken over. But we were able to remove all the vines, and hopefully the ash tree has a higher chance of success, considering the emerald ash borer is also an issue in this town. So adding invasive to the situation just made everything worse. So hopefully it has a better chance of living. And if you can go to the next slide. Another observation we made throughout this area was mowing. The area that we worked in was mowed on July 12th. And we noticed throughout these last few weeks that in that field, although all the native plants were mowed, the invasive plants are very resilient to being mowed, and most of them just were able to survive by simply laying over and avoid being mowed. So you can see on the left, there's a multiflora rose, and on the right, there's an autumn olive. And we only saw invasive species have this behavior of being able to evade the mower. And it should be noted that the autumn olive was about 3 to 4 feet tall, which means it's almost at the reproductive stage. And it may be able to create more autumn olive in that field, since it was not mowed, or, well, we removed it, but if we didn't, it would have been able to reproduce quite easily. So we kind of wanted to use this observation to bring up the question if mowing is able to facilitate the growth of more invasives, since it essentially destroys the natives and destroys any competition that the invasives will have, and allows them to encourages growth. We could go to the next slide. These are the results of both mapping, or I'm going to talk about the results of both mapping and management. So these are the mapping results. As you can see, we did about 470 observations over 2 concentrated weeks. And adding that to last year's data of about 1,600, the project for West Newbury now has about 2,080 total mapped observations on town property. If you can go to the next slide. These are some focused areas of where we were mapping. Since we did have a kind of 2-parter of both mapping and management, we did map less points, but on the left are the town offices where we first started mapping in the first few weeks. All the red dots represent a positive observation that we thought around the town offices, along with the fields behind here and the trails. On the right is Cherry Hill. As you can see, the red dots represent positive, but the yellow dots represent the treated area. This originally was last year's data, or some of it was last year's data, but we did have to add many points and update many points to treated. Like Stacy said, an issue we had was that a lot of the invasive species were hidden under other invasive species, so we had to go back and add that to the original data. If you could go to the next slide. Here's more of a quantitative look of our mapping results. On the right, I have a graph of every observation or every species we observed during our 2023 season. To no one's surprise, bittersweet is the most prolific one, along with multiflora and buckthorn. It should be noted that these numbers don't necessarily correlate to abundance. So each observation itself can either be a point or a polygon, and a polygon contains 5 or more plants. So, for example, the knotweed, there's only 3 observations on there, but there's not only 3 knotweeds in the entire town of West Newbury. That includes a polygon of a lot of knotweed that we found. So that should just be noted, along with the observations don't necessarily reflect the size of the plant or the maturity level. For example, some of the autumn olive, like we saw, was only a simple seedling, but some of it is a huge shrub, fully grown mature shrub. So if you could go to the next slide. This graph, or this is the management results of what we've been treated. So we treated autumn olive and bittersweet the most. And in total, we've treated about 39 total observations. This includes, again, points and polygons. So we began on July 12th at Cherry Hill, and we have done about 3 weeks of work, both at Cherry Hill and Quaker Cemetery. In total, we've completed about 0.75 acres of land treated, and we do have 2 weeks left of this internship, so we expect it to definitely go up more. If you could go to the next slide. We just wanted to show kind of a percent of how much has been treated. So on the left, I have a pie chart of the amount treated from what we've mapped. So we've only treated about 9% of what we've mapped. And then on the right, I have a pie chart of the total species or total observations, including last year's data and what we've treated. So that's about 2%. And I'd like to say, even though it only says we've treated about 2% of invasives, it should be noted that each treatment of invasive varies in time and speed, depending on the quantity and maturity of the invasive itself. For example, like I said, a giant polygon is only gonna count as one observation, but it took us like a half an hour to completely eradicate that polygon as opposed to a point where it was just a single plant. And again, the maturity, so like a mature autumn olive bush, which can grow up to 20 feet tall and 30 feet wide, takes a lot longer to completely eradicate as opposed to a single bittersweet vine. So it should be noted that even though it looks like we only have done 2%, it's quite a difficult job. If you could go to the next slide. Lastly, I just wanted to focus on what we've been doing at Cherry Hill, since this was our area of focus for this management, the management portion of the summer. We've treated mostly autumn olive and privet in this area, and we've treated about half of the invasives at Cherry Hill. So that's about 0.27 acres of land, and in total 26 observations treated as of the 3rd of August. Outside of like quantitative data, we also wanted to note, just for future reference, that autumn olive and bittersweet have been taking the longest amount of time in terms of management at this site. If you could go to the next slide, we just wanted to provide some recommendations for the future of how to increase the quality of this program. So we recommend adding multiple volunteer days over the season to increase manpower. Stacy and I are just 2 people, so it could take us a little bit of time to get through large areas of land, especially areas like Cherry Hill, which are completely dense and overall with invasive species. So these volunteer days could really help us out. These could include like a quick plant ID of native and invasive species, led by the interns, and also include mechanical removal, which a lot of people are familiar with. So they could either bring their own tools from home, or the town could provide extra tools for greater participation from those who do not have any. Secondly, we also wanted to increase the scope of the internship as opposed to simply management and mapping. We also were thinking adding plant, wildlife, or environmental quality metrics to kind of prove the benefits of removing invasives and managing invasives. This can include native vegetation surveys, point count surveys, or even water sampling. This could measure habitat quality essentially and see over time how that changes, or habitat use, as we remove more invasives and more natives come back. And lastly, we want to emphasize the continued monitoring of the treated areas. This early detection can really save a lot of the management costs and prevent a lot of the invasive spread throughout the area. And if you could go to the next slide, if any of this interested you, or if you'd like to see the work we have been doing at Cherry Hill, we have a volunteer day on August 10th at Cherry Hill. We really encourage a lot of people to come out, especially if you're passionate about this work. So we do have 2 time slots from 9 a.m. to 11 a.m. and 12 to 2 p.m. But yeah, if you could go to the next slide, those are the references. And then we just wanted to thank the following people: Michelle, Nancy, Carol Decker, Rick Parker, and Patricia Reeser, and also the town of West Newbury for allowing us to work here and help you guys out. So thank you so much.
Great presentation.
Questions? Yeah. So, when you're doing the mapping and if you try to remove the species and it breaks, like you said, with the vines, did you count that as a treated, or how do you?
Just treated, yes, because you can go back and you would verify that the following year, and you could record it as positive again, or you could, if you treat it again, then you can leave it as treated. Or if it is eradicated and you do successfully get it, then you can mark it as negative, but we would mark it as treated. And that does happen a lot.
Yeah.
And some of them are just too large to get the roots anyway. So our approach is to just cut them. So there are plenty of roots that are still there.
And what is a buckhorn bag? I'm not seeing that.
Sure. So buckthorn bags are very thick plastic bags that essentially, for a lot of buckthorns, you would just cut down to the stump and then apply the bag over the buckthorn to keep it from regrowing the next year, along with keep it from spreading out from the original buckthorn.
It has like a skirt.
Yeah,
And that only works on buckthorn?
No, you can use it for other species as well, but I think it was designed for buckhorns.
Interesting. If you have any questions, you can use this, right? Do you have any questions? Chris? No? Anybody?
I have a question. Phenomenal. I mean, really awesome work. It's clear, I think, to everybody, the value the town is receiving from this work. I'd be interested, I'm sure we all would, in what you have each learned in terms of your course of study. Did this enhance what you know? I mean, you both spoke as if you're polished professionals, so you know this stuff inside and out. And I'm just curious, kind of from where you started to where you are, have you gained, educationally or experientially from the work that you're doing?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. I think like there's only so much you can learn from books. And so just being able to see it in person, and I was really shocked at how bad the invasives are. Like as we are pulling, it was almost like there was nothing left, especially in Cherry Hill. Like we're pulling more and more invasives, you see more as you keep going, and it's like, where are the natives? And like, I just didn't expect it to be that bad. So it was really like just a learning experience to see that, and just to like work on plant ID was really valuable experience as well, and really fun, I think. But yeah, I think it's been great.
I would agree. It's definitely been a great learning experience for me. I definitely learned a lot of plant ID, and I also learned a lot of like the effects of invasives on an ecosystem in general, and how important it is to have like native plants and encourage native plants to grow in an area. That's really interesting.
Good. Good.
Oh, Rob.
Just wondering, the presentation, does that end up on the town projects page on the website? Will people be able to
I
easily?
think it's will be on the conservation website,
I
right?
think it posted on conservation last time, but we can post it in multiple.
Yeah, why not? Why not? Because, sometimes it's hard to navigate to all the different departments. The way listing totally confuses me where it resides on our website.
It is posted just for people watching it. Right now it's posted, it might be in another place too, but under the meeting packets.
Yeah.
So it's all of the content for the next meeting
But in the future,
and the last 5 years.
Anything else?
Yeah, this, you did a great job. The presentation was good, and obviously, we talked a little bit when we were out in the field, and you know what you're up against. It's kind of just an interesting observation, and this is something I've learned from talking with other people, like Nancy Dow's out there. She's quite knowledgeable, and Carol Decker is also a wealth of information who contributed here. And one of the things I really have taken away over the course of the last few years, trying to deal with my own piece of land, besides removing invasives, is, the old line is nature abhors the vacuum. And you pull that stuff out and you think, I'm done, but you're not. Because there's a seed bank and there's millions, literally millions of seeds there, but there's also space, and, natives need to be reintroduced frequently. And that's something we're not addressing, we're not even attempting to address, but it's a really critical part of it. If you don't reintroduce something when the space is there, then the invasive is just gonna come back.
Yeah, they allow disturbed areas.
Right, yeah.
You create disturbed
Right,
areas.
exactly, created a new disturbed area to say, home. Yeah.
Nancy, do you have a question?
Oh, no, I just thought you guys did a phenomenal job. I noticed that you have 2 trio heaven on your observation without on public land that you found beyond the one private one we had.
No, so that was actually just an error on our part, because we both mapped it, that was our first.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I guess my follow-up question was, the plant species you have, it's already allowed for you to map. Would you recommend adding like maybe early detection insect species? MOS was probably too late, too abundant to map, but a new ones coming in, like the lanternfly or something like that. To focus on the host plants, and for the interns, maybe include that in their mapping in the future. So we can
I think that would be great, yeah. Yeah, there's just so much to get done that, like it's hard to balance the mapping and the management because you want to do both. But yeah, I think that would be great. I would love doing that.
Yeah, I think it's important that, so obviously we've already identified a lot of plants, that you spent the last 2 months, going after, identifying and then removing. And one of the things we need to do is look for, along the lines of looking for insects, new introductions, looking for new plants. I think I mentioned to Michelle at one point that, there's a growth of wild parsnip that's growing in the power line off of Sawmill Brook Road. And that's a nasty plant and it's nasty for humans, so it isn't just a nasty plant for being invasive, but it's a dermatologically very strong acting plant. If you brush against it and get in the sun and get exposed to sun, you can get burned very badly. So, this kind of stuff we need to look for. Obviously, this is just an internship, but in general, we need to be aware of new plants that are invasives, that are a problem, and try to nail them before they become a problem.
Great, well, thank you very much for your work and for the presentation tonight. And I guess you have 1 more week, right?
Yes, we do.
All right, with that. All right, the next item is review of committees, charge and function. And we'll start with the Conservation Commission.
I'm just getting her stuff at block of 35.
All right, we'll start with the Community Preservation Committee. So that's the second form, and I guess I'm the only representative here for that. But so did you, either of you have any comments or questions about the answers we went through at our meeting last month? A lot of the CPC work is prescribed. There's not a lot of, leeway in what we do. I think what's in the charge document that the town clerk's office is working on is essentially just the bylaw. So we would suggest putting this kind of summary paragraph in about the CPC function. Accomplishments in the past year, we completely overhauled the CP plan, which is a requirement by the legislation. We consolidated and streamlined the application forms, which was long overdue. Some projects that we reviewed and recommended is the Almond House Cemetery scan and also the transfer of community housing funds to the Affordable Housing Trust. And we just finished the grant agreement, which is on the agenda for tonight for final approval. This is board. Going forward, the annual public hearing is a requirement. We'll do that. I think we're scheduling July next year after town meeting. One thing in the CP plan is looking at the chapter 61 land purchasing and see if we can streamline the CP review process so that it can happen within the 30 days instead of that holding up the process. The other thing of no other input.
Sorry, I'm seeing a hand raised. So I think it's, is that Patricia?
Yeah.
Maybe just
Okay.
acknowledging she's also a member of the CPC.
Yeah.
Patricia, was that your comment or did you have a comment? Sorry, I just noticed the hand raised.
Sorry, no, I just had a question if we're talking about the CPC charge.
Yeah.
So it came up, I think, last year, Wendy, and when I was the open space rep to the CPC, on whether or not the CPC's charge includes opining whether the project should be moved forward, or merely deciding that it's eligible and should go to town meeting. And I'm not sure I know the answer to that by statute.
I think, isn't the committee charged with determining the eligibility and then approving the funding? Is that what?
Well, I guess it's more than that. I guess my question and my confusion is whether or not the statute and the town policy is that the committee is to determine, in the first place, is it eligible for the CPC? And if it is, whether or not it then goes to town meeting or whether the project can stop then and there by virtue of the committee's opinion that it should not proceed to town meeting.
Isn't it inherent if we approve the funding application that it goes to town meeting?
Yeah, I think Patricia's saying if the CPC doesn't, even if it's found to be eligible, if they
Right.
find that it's not something they recommend, would it still go forward? I've always understood it would not go forward without a CPC positive recommendation, not just the eligibility, but it's, the
So that would
CPC
be-
also needs to recommend.
Wouldn't that be, if you approve the funding application?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I guess the funding application works as the approval process, whether it gets referred to the town meeting or not.
So the grounds for the CPC not, sorry, so I'm unclear on what the grounds for the CPC not approving the funding application would be.
If they don't think it's a good project for the town, if the, you know, the backup is not sufficient, I mean, there have been some that we have not approved, I think.
Well, no, you know, clearly if they have not submitted the documents that the CPC has said that need to be submitted, obviously that's grounds for refusing it. I guess I'm talking about substantively, whether or not by statute or town policy, the CPC has the ability to say, no, this is not a project we think the town should go forward with, irrespective of whether it meets the legal requirements of eligibility and application conformity.
Yeah, my view is that the funding application process satisfies what you're talking about. You know, what we're approving in that application is whether we approve of the, I mean, we're approving the project. It's not whether we think the funding is adequate. So there's more to it in that second piece. I mean, we look at, you know, do other town committees and town departments support it? You know, is the scope well defined? Are the contractors that are, you know, have been given information, is that reputable? And there's a whole host of things beside the dollar amount that go into that review process. So to me, that's the piece that the CPC offers their recommendation of whether it should go forward to town meeting.
I guess I'm asking something further, which is whether or not the CPC itself can decide that the project, notwithstanding what other committees think, is not a project that should go forward.
So it sounds to me as though you're kind of saying different things, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, Patricia, but it sounds like you're saying, you know, are CPC members philosophically in agreement with or philosophically opposed to what the project is trying to accomplish. I don't know if that's what you mean or not, but that's what it sounds like.
It sounds close to what I mean. So it's really whether the CPC is an administrative body or a policy body.
And I, you know, my personal take is, and I'm not on the CPC, is that it should be that ultimately the decision should be up to town meeting. You know, if, you know, so it's, I seems to me CPC should be more an administrative body, as opposed to, you know, making the philosophical decision whether or not this is something that ought to be done.
Is there a particular project in mind, Patricia, that you feel like this is, that this was a concern?
Not doesn't come to mind immediately, but it was an issue that came to mind last year on a couple of occasions that I can't recall. But I really, you know, when I saw this on the agenda tonight, I thought, okay, yeah. I mean, I'd like to hear what the charge of the CPC really is, both statutorily and as a policy from the Board of Selectmen. And, you know, it would be very helpful, I think, if the CPC knew if it, you know, if the proposed project met the criteria for eligibility and it met all the CPC's requirement for submissions, then it gets passed on to town meeting, or whether or not the CPC could divert it and say, no, this is not an appropriate project.
Or does it go to the select board and then decide whether it goes to the warrant?
No, it's the CPC recommends it to town meeting.
I always thought it was a town, there was a committee policy that they evaluate not only, I mean, if it was just gonna be an administrative function, it would need, you wouldn't really need a committee. You just have to have someone checking the boxes and saying, okay, this qualifies. I think the CPC was charged by town policy with evaluating a project in light of the master plan, in light of the goals of the town as they saw it. And if their vision of what the town should be doing was wrong, they would get replaced. You know, so that's not perfect, but I don't think the CPC is strictly just an administrative function.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, there are two separate applications. One is just, is it eligible, which is
Right.
purely administrative. I mean, I
And
guess
then
you
you
could
could fit
argue
the
it.
footprint of where we see the town going.
Right. And so the membership on the CPC, for those who don't know, there's somebody from the Housing Authority, some from Historical Commission, Conservation Commission, now the Open Space Committee, Select Board, Planning Board, so like all the different entities in town are represented on that. So I do think it's meant to give, you know, opinions, you know, that are represented by all those different groups.
Well, I'm looking at the whole charge, the long version, it does talk about making their recommendation.
Yeah.
It's not just that they check the right boxes. So it appears to me that they're looking for the recommendation of this group of people if it's a valid project.
That's always been my understanding, is that CPC is totally empowered to apply a qualitative filter, and that an eligible project wouldn't go to town meeting, even if the select board or whomever else was pushing it. It wouldn't go without CPC recommendation. That's always been my understanding. And I've seen that happen in a couple of instances where things were, they might have been withdrawn because people took the temperature and it
Right.
didn't seem to
That's
be,
what's happening.
yeah, but I think CPC is a gatekeeper.
Mhm.
And I think that's why it's by statute set up as a multidisciplinary committee that represents a lot of the major boards in town.
Right, well, each of the 7 individuals on the committee represents a particular perspective. And, and to me, that's somewhat of an administrative, sort of part of the administrative process. You have these different perspectives that are going to support or not support it. But I guess I'm a little uncomfortable with sort of personal philosophical perspective as opposed to somebody representing their board, committee, or commission.
I just raised it because it would be very helpful, I think, for clarification, for that to be really clear for the CPC
Oh, yeah.
and to the applicants.
Yeah, so this was part of our discussion at the last meeting, right? Did you have a different opinion about this charge that the CPC put forward?
I don't recall the exact text of the charge, but when I saw it was on your agenda tonight, I thought it was worth asking the question.
Okay.
So just to be clear, because we keep using terms like recommend. What Patricia's kind of getting at is, do they have the ability to approve or not approve
Yes.
going to town meeting? So I don't think that the word recommend is great in that case, because there are other boards, for instance, FinCom, that can make recommendations as well, but we're not the ones who bring it to town meeting. So you're actually, Patricia's looking for clarity. Do they get to approve or not approve an application? Correct?
Yes, they do. There's 2 applications that are approved or not approved,
So it won't go to town meeting unless they approve it.
unless both applications are approved.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm looking for some guidelines on why the CPC would approve or disapprove.
That would have to be project by project.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, but what's the big picture? Is it because it's in the comprehensive plan? Because it's in the open space plan? Because it's in the Affordable Housing Trust's charge? I mean,
yes. all of these.
Oh,
I think
but is
that's
that,
the purpose.
but is that clear, Wendy? Is that clear anywhere?
I mean, it is to me. I've never even had this question, so obviously it's not clear to you, maybe other people, but that's the purpose of having all those different boards and committees represented. You know, because each one of those is familiar with the plan that their committee works under. We also have the CP plan that the entire committee works on to, you know, identify projects that are either in the works or that are important for the town. So that's updated annually, so that's an opportunity to provide input for the public as well as for the committees.
And yeah, so if you're working on a charge of what the CPC does, that would be very helpful to include.
Yeah, so that we're just reviewing the charge that the CPC gave to us. So this is what was approved at the CPC's last meeting. I don't have an issue with the way it's written. You know, maybe we could take recommendations out. But it sounds like you're okay with it, Chris?
It seemed pretty straightforward.
Yeah.
So I hear what she's saying. The CPC theoretically could opt not to move a project forward that would comply with everything. You know, if there was some political bent that they didn't agree with on it. So it could become a little subjective, but I don't see that really happening in this town.
7 members, so 4 would have to be.
We really had to irritate somebody at that point tonight.
The only other item that was highlighted on here is, and the question, is there other input you wish to provide? There's still some ongoing, not confusion, but just questions about the role of procurement and when we review an application. You know, in order to get a funding, to get a cost estimate, you have to talk to a contractor. Does that then give the impression that they would have the work? You know, that whole thing is kind of fuzzy, and I guess we would look for more help from DPW or the projects manager in terms of getting a realistic cost estimate and how to deal with the vendors so that we're not portraying that they have the work when we're just asking for a cost estimate. That's come up on a couple projects, and we still have a clear path on that.
I think, you know, part of what we've arrived at least in the interim, is communication is key. That before people bring forward a proposal or contacting prospective vendors on a speculative basis and asking for things that would be encouraged to contact the procurement officer and just let them know. And maybe the procurement officer might be comfortable with those questions being asked if they're asked in a certain way, or maybe soliciting estimates from multiple prospective vendors. The thing that we want to avoid is if, you know, when an outside entity, a prospective vendor is contacted by someone in the town from where they sit, if the town is the town is the town. And we don't want any appearance that, you know, whether it's a resident or a committee member or a staff person, if they're contacting a prospective vendor, it definitely can create an impression that if the project is funded, that vendor will be hired. And depending on the you know, value of the work, that it may well trigger bidding, and that can create hurt feelings or worse.
Mm-hmm.
So I think the committee's had some really productive discussions of that, but it has proved difficult to pin down exactly what the right approach is, because it's true what you said, Wendy, that you often can't come up with a good cost estimate without speaking to prospective vendors or people who really know the business. So I think communication is key, and just letting the procurement function of the town know that this is, and then they, you know, we can be assistants in putting together a strong proposal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and along the lines of communication, there was one question on how kind of select board and town manager better support the work, and people felt, I guess, that you really help us by keeping us apprised of projects that are coming down the road, and so we have time to get all these questions together, and that's just been helpful, you know, long-term planning. Because it is a tight time frame to review these applications and to be ready for town meeting. Any other thoughts?
A question.
Yeah.
2-year priority, number 1, advocate for maintaining funding level of 3% and maximize award of state funds.
Mm-hmm.
Does that mean within town to advocate for that? And the state's not diminishing anything, are they?
No, but there have been past efforts to reduce the 3%, and
I
so.
think that next step is relocated too.
Well-
I don't know if there's another undercurrent, I'm just curious.
We just always want to be conscious of that.
So there's nothing on the horizon,
No.
maybe just preemptive.
No.
Okay.
It's always a priority because we get 3 rounds of funding for every 3%.
Did
All
that
right.
change at some point too? Did they shut the door on that if you weren't?
I don't know. Are you aware?
I thought the state at one point was capping that, or if you weren't already in the program. 3 years ago, there was some conversation over 3%. Not getting maintained on a continuous basis. I don't know.
I'm not sure.
I think
Well,
there,
there's no assurance that the state's going to
Right.
The amount,
match.
yeah.
That varies based on, it's a fee on, real estate transactions. And then the pool of municipalities drawing from it, so.
Maybe that's what the
Yeah,
number of towns that got in.
So that, well, yeah, the towns that were in early at 3%, when few other communities were in, were making out very well. Now it's diluted because,
So is
many of the
3% going down?
communities, including the city of Boston, participated and, you know, so the pool of funds available now are spread over for the 3%. Municipalities are spread over a lot greater number of towns or municipalities.
So is the 3% stagnant or is it going down? Do we know?
Oh, it's been going down. I mean, it hasn't been 3%. I mean,
No.
we pay 3%,
Yeah.
but what we get from the
Okay.
state has
When do we get that from the state?
diminished.
You don't know?
Yeah, no, you know, we have a surtax, 3% surtax. And we benefit by getting, you know, the 3rd round of state funding. But the pot of state funding has not grown commensurate with the,
So the
with
state,
the
the
number
state
of
is coming
communities.
down, the money we get from the state.
has decreased,
My
correct?
understanding
But
is the
it-
second round is not being funded.
It varies year to year.
Yeah, we did
Yeah,
get,
but in this year's budget or this fiscal 20,
going forward, yeah.
the second round is not funded.
Yes, they seem to,
Yeah.
they say that, and then they come up with one.
Yeah.
So,
And then the 3rd round is based on I don't know what the source of that 3rd round is. Is that just what hasn't been allocated or? Yeah,
Chris, in the community preservation plan, which is on the CPC website, there is a table 3 has the last 15 years of total surcharges, interest, earnings on investment, state matches, percentage of surcharge, and it varies. It's hard to generalize in looking at this. The first 2 years in 2007, 2008 were 100%. Then it was 70% and so on and so forth, but just in the last 4 years, the state match as a percentage of the surcharge was 51% in 2019, 62%, and then 85% each of the last 2 years. So it's really, you can't generalize. It changes every single year.
The biggest benefit is getting the 3% isolated
Yeah.
locally.
Yes, yeah, you'll definitely
We're
get the
eligible
most
for 3 rounds.
return, but there's no guarantee how much you get.
Okay, move on to Conservation Commission. So shall I just read through the questionnaire, or do you wanna discuss? No?
However,
Okay. One question I had, the charge is pretty much a reference to the regulation. I'm wondering maybe if we could reduce that to how you see your role in town.
yeah,
And then just reference, I think this is helpful so people understand what the commission is supposed to be doing.
Yeah, and I think when I included in the grid part, the page 1 on here, the board commission charge, I pretty much copied what MACC had generalized about all of the different statutes that the Conservation Commission is created under and is involved with. And then that might be, a good thing for us to go through and kind of like paraphrase that into a less lengthy read. But I agree, the charge as written today is not fully, explaining everything that the Conservation Commission is charged with.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we're
Yeah.
improvement there.
Yeah, one thing of note too, under appointing authority, that it says that the town manager, if you have a town manager, the town manager appoints the Conservation Commission members, which has not been our practice in the past, but I think going forward, that's something that we could do, or we should do.
yeah, so the town manager appoints but with the final approval
Subject to the approval.
Subject to the approval.
We have an option on that, you make it sound like it's optional.
It's not, we just haven't followed it because.
Well, I just, the tradition was obviously all the appointments prior to the town manager form of government went to the select board. And then it was my first year, Mike McCarron, kind of with a sly smile, said, oh, well, you're, you should, and so, I was brand new. I didn't want to appear to be overreaching. It was my understanding. It was actually my understanding that Mike found this out after adoption of the town manager act. I really don't think this was something that was known to him or to the select board or to town meeting voters when the town manager act was adopted. So when he made me aware, I didn't want to rock the boat. I had a lot of fish frying for first year. So, but what I did is I just changed the header on the materials presented to the board. So instead of saying appointed by the board, it said recommended to the board for appointment. I made some subtle change and didn't draw a lot of attention to it. So in practice, it's been the board voting it every year. Technically, I'm the one putting together the packet, so I'm technically putting the names in front of you, and I've known for 5 years I could not do that, or check kind of.
That's what that's what the regulation provides.
That's what the state law does. Yeah.
So, I mean, that's one of the reasons to do this, to going forward, I think we can make that.
It's
change.
just a gray area out of it, so.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's another question.
sure.
Says the not less than 3 members or more than 7. Currently, you've got 6 with the associate.
We would have 5 with the associate, so the associate doesn't count as a member.
Okay, so you got the 5.
They're not a voting member, I guess, yeah, that's a better.
So
So
if
this-
Haley was an associate, that we,
So this is not the bylaw, we also have a bylaw. Right?
The not less than 3, not more than 7 is state legislation or state
Right.
statute.
But how did we get it 5? I think that.
I think that was, I have a memo somewhere in the Concom files that the
was
select
a
board
select board.
just decided
Yeah.
that.
got a state saying,
Well, we're in that range, not less than 3, not more than 7.
We're in the middle of
Yeah. So what do you think about the 5? You think that's a good number? 7 would be hard to fill.
I agree with that.
I don't know, it's not necessarily true. We had 7 in Merrimack with 2 alternates. We always had filled spots. I mean, I think the more members you have on a board, the more different perspectives you have on situations and files that are in front of you, and that's often good. You kind of stop operating, in an echo chamber, because you have different people seeing things differently and interpreting things differently, which can be helpful.
I was thinking we had Haley tonight, and we had to make her an associate member because there wasn't a position available.
Right.
If you can have up to 7, give her the opportunity to have to vote and stay.
Nice to have an odd number for voting.
Yeah.
No, it's an even number, which would be an odd number.
No, we
Yeah,
have
we have 5
an
now.
odd number today. We have an odd-
Right, yeah, I was, you were saying 6 would be an odd number.
An even number would be odd.
Exactly.
It's too early to be going down that road.
I got it.
Rick, you had a week, all right, the rest of us did.
All right, so I mean, maybe that's something, so if we could find out. I mean, are we at 5? Is that our requirement?
I'd be
That's-
interested in that,
Yeah.
whatever you have on file, that sounds like maybe was a memo or
The
some.
memo from
action.
the select board. and
Yeah,
select board
I haven't
reached
seen that.
say From 7 to 5 members, and I think, if I'm remembering, it was because there was difficulty filling the roles, so that's why the membership was reduced.
That's not mine.
That's what the memo said.
You get this one.
All right, so that's.
So if you make it untenable, people won't apply.
That certainly happens sometimes.
Right.
Okay, moving along. These are great accomplishments. I think there's been a lot of good work by the commission, especially with Michelle's tenure here. Not just on applications, but on, greenbelt coordination and the invasive work. Priorities for next year, I hired 2 seasonal land stewards. That's very interesting. I haven't seen that before. I like it.
Yeah, I think there's a lot more work that could be done with invasive mapping and management, but also create more meaningful, use of taxpayers' funds, and then a medium or meaningful work experience for the people that we hire. Kind of just step on something, continue the invasive stuff, but then also there's some things that I do that could be a very good summer job for someone, and some things that I just don't have time to do, conservation-based land marketing. What a great one to have on your resume as someone going into this profession, and really meaningful work still for the town. It's just one of those things I never get to, unless there's an issue.
Right. I noticed on the 2-year priorities, work on the open space and recreation plan, so that will be, the Conservation Commission hasn't in the past
That's interesting. If you read like
participated, the open space
this
committee.
statute on it, it's the Conservation Commission really is the,
Yeah.
should, I don't want to say should, but if you read that verbatim in text, I mean, they should at least have a very large role in that.
Mhm.
There's so much overlap.
So now that you are attending the open space committee members, you're kind of a liaison, and you also have David. So that would be a good, time to start the discussion now, so that if there is gonna be a change or sharing of responsibilities, that everybody's aware. One question, jump in if you need.
Well, let's see what you got now.
All right, so on the, how can the select board town manager better help you? I just want to ask about the public relations and the less public jokes and negative comments. I don't believe any of that has come from this board. Am I not remembering?
Maybe not this board in the past couple of months,
Okay,
but I think historically,
yeah,
there's been a lot of, we just had a job during this meeting about a contentious board not having people want to join, so I think historically. Our accountable was the term I think that was gonna be used, so I mean, it happens, it rolls off the tongue, I mean, I giggled too, but I mean, I think it definitely doesn't help. To try to get people want to be involved with the Conservation Commission or take their work seriously, if it's just kind of seen as like, regulatory that stands in the way and like isn't, reasonable and is, impossible to work with. If that's the image that's proliferated, that's not helpful.
sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's definitely. I feel like when I was recruited, it was in order to be, I was told that the commission was getting in the way of things getting done in town. I think it was more the high school permitting process, but. I think that kind of line is easy for people to make because it's a regulatory board that. I think we really want to present ourselves as being fair and balanced.
And also providing more than just regulatory, as is our charge at the state level, it's outreach, it's education, it's getting people to understand. All of the benefits, right? It's not just a wetland, it's, storm protection, so your basin doesn't flood, it's, protection along river roads, so river road doesn't get washed away, like it's really community resources and not just, oh no, I have a wet area in my backyard and this is a headache every time I want to do something. It's more than that.
So that if you work on refining your charge, it might be a good opportunity to really
I
hone
think
in
so.
on what you think is important.
Yeah.
I was just I wanted to make sure you understood, Michelle, that was not directed, the use of the word untenable was not directed
I
at
don't even think
the.
I heard you say.
It was sort of, how do you not attract people to a board? We were talking about the difficulty of, or it was
Oh.
referenced the difficulty getting people on board, and it's, you don't make it untenable. You make
Right.
being on a board attractive, that's,
I agree, yes.
that's how you make sure you have membership.
I think that's something we're working on.
So people feel as though they're accomplishing something important.
Yeah, that's important.
Do you have any that I missed or any different comments? Other BCCs, I think the Conservation Commission overlaps with just about all of the non-financial.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, so I think we kind of discussed in the meeting that I attended last week or the week before about maybe doing some outreach to departments and other committees. I think that could be really helpful too.
Yeah, I find it's interesting sometimes just talking to other departments. That they don't realize what we do or like what we have knowledge of, maybe sometimes there's like reinventing the wheel and it's like, oh no, like these maps already exist from the state, like here they are, and you can look at them this way, and just the stuff to make everyone's jobs easier, when there is that overlap, especially with like land use planning stuff.
Another thing that we talked about when Angus and I met with the commission is the importance of the bylaw, getting the bylaw passed and, so I think the commission is shooting for spring town meeting.
Yep, and I think we're going to be looking at doing, at least for the next few months, a third monthly meeting. That's more administrative business, perhaps virtual, perhaps a more convenient time of day to really encourage people to be able to, you know, sit and tune in to the bylaw. It's gonna be easier for the commission to manage too. Often, you know, we're pretty busy with filings and enforcement, and we get to the bylaw discussion, it's 10:30, 11 o'clock at night. It's not really time,
Yeah.
you know, nitty gritty work. So we're kind of eyeing doing that third meeting. We have one already scheduled for this month, and that'll just be really to hone in on the bylaw and then bring that energy forward to continue with regulations and things like that.
Sounds great.
Yeah.
Anything else? I had one question, suggestion maybe, if the commission might consider moving their meeting to a different night so it doesn't conflict with the select board meetings. I mean, if we are gonna work together on the bylaw and things like that, it might be nice to be able to, you know, jump back and forth, but it's fine.
You also won't have a whole bunch of people sitting here.
I know.
You're-
I think putting signs on the door from now on, that the second floor is like, go to the elevator, hit floor 2.
Yeah, but I would second what Wendy
Yes.
just said, because I would on occasion go to the Conservation Commission meeting.
Yeah.
But.
Yeah.
That opportunity doesn't exist.
I think it's a discussion we're having.
We've been discussing it.
Yeah.
Yeah, here.
Yep.
Right.
Just, yeah, two comments, one to follow on that, Michelle, I know you know this, but just, the town is making some investments in second floor hearing room with the support of the cable advisory committee to add, a screen, an owl, and a laptop. So that's gonna be fully fitted up for remote hybrid meetings, so that's gonna be a resource available to the Concom as well as any other board or committee that might want to take advantage of that space to have a virtual or hybrid meeting. Secondly, on the priorities, another thing that we had talked about when we met with the commission a couple of weeks ago, and might be a good 2-year priority, would be looking at that wetlands fund. Because, you know, there's significant balances built up, very little outgoing activity. And so I think making sure the commission's fully aware of what the eligible uses are and that the town have some kind of a, you know, idea for what is the intent of that money, because I know there's certain things that could be used for that could offset taxpayer costs, and that needs to be a policy decision as to whether we want to do that or not. But to see the fund continue to grow without any articulated plan, and I don't think that's a near-term thing, and at least in my view. But I think over the course of a couple of years, it'd be good to have more
Yeah,
of
that's
a
a good one.
strategic plan for that.
Roughly how much is the fund?
It's over $200,000.
It's not, no, is it? No, it's just over 100,000.
Oh,
Like 100, like 120 maybe.
It's still
That's a
like,
good party.
It's a lot of money.
yeah.
okay.
So,
Keep your eyes on that, Rob.
Oh, okay, yeah, 122.
so would you consider making some changes to this and resubmitting it, and then we'll bring some of the things we discussed?
We can do that, yeah, and I think kind of really quick just on the, that fund, so that fund is filing fees, unrelated, but it ties in really nicely. Our filing fee schedule maybe wasn't the most clearest or fairest. So we are working on that, and I think there will be a reduction in a lot of fees for projects. So there will still be money coming in, but yeah, just making it more fair and equitable on the filing fees, you know, what we're really looking to get from those and how we're determining them. So that is something we might finalize at the next meeting, is on for discussion tomorrow night.
That meeting's tomorrow night?
Because we're here tonight.
Right.
So they can do it.
Right. So one other thing, we were going to assign select board members to each board, commission, committee. One of you like to be assigned to the conservation commission? This is just to be a liaison. You don't have to attend every meeting, but just kind of be the go-to person if things come up.
Well, actually, if they don't change the meeting day, it'd be really easy because you wouldn't have to go to any.
Right. But still, even if you could go to the meeting,
Yeah.
if there was somebody they knew, Michelle or Molly or anybody to reach out to. I could do it, but perhaps that's something you'd like to do since you're looking at invasive.
Yeah, no, I'd do that.
Could you explain more what that liaison role would look like?
Yeah, so we're just,
Look like this.
Yeah.
just so that the select board is more involved with the committee work that's going on, so ideally attend the meetings. Or just be a person that anybody on the commission could reach out to if they had concerns, or if they had questions about what the board thinks about something, just an additional point of contact, so that we're less kind of in silos, you know. Which is part of the reason for going through this whole process of, you know, getting input. So, all right, we'll put you in for that. All right, thank you, for those of you who are here. So we're moving into the Ash Street discussion, which ties in with all of you being here. So in the packet, I just drafted an update. There were several, at the last meeting, we had several questions came up that needed more follow-up. There's kind of 4 general areas. The first, the suggestion was made to reach out to MVPC to see about traffic calming in the area. So I did reach out to Patrick Reed, who's the transportation program manager, and his email is in the packet. I'll post it online if you're interested in what he had to say. He spent some time out there and he noted that the ruts in the road are acting like speed bumps in effect, and that cars would slow down, but the bigger trucks would just go around through because they don't feel it. He also noted that the transitions from the 35-mile-per-hour paved sections onto the gravel, it's kind of abrupt, and that you could do things to calm down the traffic on the paved portion so that as they get to the gravel, they're not going so fast, but that would require PE and, you know, a lot of stuff. That's something that they can't offer to us right now, but he identified it as a possible thing to look into. The second topic of follow-up revolved around protection of endangered species and habitat in the area. So Michelle and Angus and I had a remote meeting with members of the Natural Heritage and Endangered Species section of Mass Fish and Wildlife. And then we also had a site walk out on Ash Street with the DPW, highway superintendent, and police chief and fire chief. So the basics of this is that Blanding's turtles, that's a habitat for them, which is an endangered species. However, that organization is not really able to help us in terms of upgrades to the road unless we document the species is there. If it is there, then perhaps there's state and or federal money available to, you know, deal with culverts and that kind of thing. So they asked if somebody on staff in the town could start doing roadkill surveys, which is kind of gruesome, but that's one of the ways you document. So Michelle has been doing that.
Yeah, and actually, there's several people from Mass Wildlife who were actually in attendance.
Right.
Right.
So they counts the deaths of the turtles.
Yeah.
Been doing that.
So my thought is I'm just going to summarize this memo and then we can take comments from people that are in attendance. So another thing they pointed out, there was a lot of discussion about maybe barriers along the side of the road to keep wildlife out of the road. And they pointed out that those barriers are to direct wildlife to a crossing, and there's really no crossing on that road. So it's not really an effective way to deal with the situation. Road closure, a lot of people would like the road to be closed at least seasonally, including Mass Fish and Wildlife. However, our police and fire chief is really against that idea. We need the emergency access from the Newbury and Georgetown side of the swamp. And so that's, there was discussion at the sidewalk about that. And Chief Dwyer expressed his concerns to Mass Fish and Wildlife, and they understand where we're at on that.
Next question about that. Like when, say the fire truck comes over from Byfield, there's a station in Byfield. Obviously, they're over the limit. But they would go over that road anyway, right?
Yeah, it's gonna be dependent on the location, the emergency.
Yeah.
But my ultimate concern is ambulance,
Yeah, okay.
especially with closures adjacent to that road as well.
Right, yeah,
Is
yeah.
there a way to close the road without a physical concrete barrier? Is there some effective legal means to close the road without impeding emergency access.
The concern comes that people will still try to, yeah, still try to.
They go around marked areas.
Yeah, we had a conversation about that.
Yeah,
The police have done a fabulous job of patrolling that area through, I'm
yeah,
sure.
no, we have a few officers that have been doing it.
Yeah, really helpful. One other point in terms of the road closures, if you close that road, then around the reservoir is where they're gonna go, where there's always a flock of geese in the road, so it's, you have to be careful, where you reroute to. And then the final area that we looked into is, it's actually two more, sorry, signs and enforcement. There is signage out there, but Chief Dwyer is gonna work with the DPW to see if we need enhanced signage, maybe, make sure the vegetation is clear. One thing this Mass Fish and Wildlife did point out is that they have not found new or increased signage to be effective in other areas that they've looked at in terms of reducing wildlife roadkill. One of the things that we are considering possibly is purchasing a radar trailer that could be used there as well as throughout town, that would just not only signal to motorists how fast they're going, but could also collect data about how many vehicles are passing, how fast they're going, and that kind of thing. So that could be useful. And in the past, there's the quote that Chief Dwyer solicited to purchase one of those trailers. And then the final topic that has been discussed is the cost of maintaining the gravel road. So in the past 4 or 5 years, anytime the ruts start, it's regraded, and some people feel like, well, that's kind of a natural speed bump. Maybe we shouldn't do it so often. It does become a safety issue. It's so rutted that, you know, it's dangerous to cross over. But we have the information here about how much it costs. So in 2022, it was done 8 times at an average cost of $1,000. So it's not insignificant. It's been done 5 times already this year, and after our site visit, which agreed to just hold off, the highway superintendent said he would hold off pending tonight's discussion about how we want to manage that going forward. So I guess the whole point of this is, you know, this is the information we found. A lot of these 5 areas kind of have conflicting needs, and so our job, I guess, is to figure out how to balance these all and try to make the most people happy. I think I'd like to, if you have any initial comments, I'll take it from the board and then invite the representatives from Mass Fish and Wildlife to comment, and then see if there's anybody.
Can you reverse the order and let Mass Fish and Wildlife comment first?
Sure.
And then the board? I think that might be better.
Sure, so I can't see everybody that we have. I know that Pat Harkery is interested in attending. I'm not sure if I see her on there. And
She's on vacation, so she may be on her iPhone. And I don't know.
Pat, are you present? No, we also have Mark is from Fish and Wildlife, is that right?
And Gagnon, actually.
I invite anybody that wants to comment from Mass Fish and Wildlife to just say your name and.
Hi, this is Ann Gagnon. I'm the Northeast District land agent. But I understand that Pat Huckery, who is the district manager, was planning to attend this evening. So I don't know if she had, you know, technical difficulties or something came up. So I would defer to her.
Okay. Anybody else on remote want to ask a question or make a comment?
Hi, my name is Mark Irving. I am not with Fish and Wildlife, but I do work. I'm part of 2 nonprofits that we do work on behalf of Fish and Wildlife, specifically with endangered species, the Blanding's turtle. And I know that having been out there and looking at the site and with previous records, that area does support a population of this state protected species. I understand all the issues at hand, but I can also attest to the fact that putting signage up honestly doesn't really affect anything. I am part of a volunteer crew that during nesting season, we're at a couple other sites where these turtles exist. That's also part of the that town's water supply aquifer. And they put signage up and it makes zero difference.
Mhm.
I mean, honestly, you know, because
That's what
nobody, people don't, I hate to say it, a lot of people don't pay attention. You know, they're busy, they're on their phones or whatever. You know, so I don't know. Well, I'd love in a perfect world to say that would be pie in the sky and that would work. I was out there one time with a fellow colleague of mine, just walking that short Ash Street section. And in the hour we were out there, the amount of cars that drove by that did not slow down, those are just regular cars, plus the 2 dump trucks and the big pickup truck hauling a boat and another panel truck that were all over that, what is it, 5,000 pound limit for that road. Crazy. And they didn't slow down even when we were in the road. They didn't slow down. They just honked to tell us to get out of the way. So, I mean, I wish we could find a solution that works for everyone.
Yeah.
The barrier part that was mentioned earlier, that's just going to move wildlife down the road. It's not going to actually alleviate the problem.
Right. Okay, thank you.
All right, if I can just take a moment, I apologize. I turned my camera on. My light is not good here. So I'm Mike Henry. I work with Mark. I work with Turtle Rescue League. I've been surveying a section of West Newbury for 4 years now, and gathering really detailed data on turtles specifically for the last 2 years. So I do a road survey was mentioned. I've got plenty of information if anyone is interested in that, if that could be useful. Just real quick out of my data here, 55 turtles killed in the last 2 years that I witnessed. So certainly there were more, up to, it was 43 that I got out of the way of oncoming cars. So I just one thing I just wanted to mention is that I agree that Cherry Hill Street, so I drive that whole area several times a day, every day from March to late October. There are geese all over along the reservoir, and every animal is valuable, but I just would like to point out how much more a single turtle or reptile means to its population than a single goose does. The geese can also leave the road. You pretty much have to try to hit the geese. Reptiles, and especially the turtles, it's not the case. Even people who drive very carefully on that stretch of Ash Street, with the potholes, which yes, they do sort of act as speed bumps. They also hide snakes, turtles, and small birds. So even the people who are driving responsibly across that stretch, which are not many in my opinion, I spend a lot of time out there, you're still likely to kill something, even if you're trying hard not to. The only other question I would like people to think about for now would be $1,000 per grading. I'd be interested to know more about how that was calculated. That seems very low. Unless it's one pass with one person driving a truck and they're not putting down any material, I have trouble understanding how that could only be $1,000. So that might be something to consider. That seems very low.
Yeah, we have detailed records from the DPW. It's 3 to 5 loads of gravel, half a day's work for 2 laborers, dump truck back with them.
Okay,
So,
cool.
Yeah, we have a spreadsheet of.
Nice. Okay, well that's not too bad.
So have you supplied your turtle data to Mass Fish and Wildlife? Because that's what they're looking for, in order to document that there's an issue with Blanding's turtles.
Yep, not all of it yet, but the Blandings have been in there. Yep. So I just wanted to make myself available. If anyone wants any of that information, it can give a head start on a road survey. I'm still doing it, so I can be part of that. But there is some data there that already exists from the last couple of years, and some very extensive checking of that location several times a day.
So our conservation agent, Michelle Green, will be in touch.
Yeah, I don't know if someone could maybe. If you could email us, my email's on the website, and if, could I ask Michael a question? Michael, I know that, rare species data is pretty sensitive, so if you don't want to share this on a public meeting, I understand for poaching reasons. But have you ever encountered, roadkill landing turtle at the site?
Not killed,
Not killed, but alive, yes.
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
almost killed.
All right, and I don't see anybody else online that,
Want to ask Andy, I mean, if she wants to speak. I'm as well, but.
She spoke initially, deferred to Pat Humphrey.
yeah. Yeah, I sent Pat the Zoom link today, so I'm not sure.
Yeah, she had emailed me and said she was on vacation, but she was going to try to attend that. At the end,
I'm gonna read that, but.
Yeah.
She may have been on earlier with the link.
yeah.
Yeah, Pat did come back from vacation. She was in the office today. And I know that she was planning on attending this evening, so I don't know if she had technical difficulties or, something came up at home or whatever, so I'm sure she'll be in touch with you.
Okay, great.
Wendy, if I could, this is Mark again. I just wanted to mention one other thing. With regards to the grading on that little section of Ash Street, one thing to piggyback on what Mike was referring to, if you go out there, you can kind of see, obviously, it's a very narrow stretch, right? And the more it gets graded, the higher that road is. I know there's been incidents already in the past where, whether it be an Amazon panel truck or whatever, and even with a car or a four-wheel drive vehicle, that slope is so steep that once you hit the edge of that, there's a lot of potential for vehicles going down into that stretch of water. And you can see evidence of that already happening in the past. So that's one thing to consider. Because I know while this may not necessarily directly lead into a water supply, all these wetlands in general, it's part of one big aquifer that helps supply the town's water supply. So, and the other thing I wanted to mention, while we don't have many records of dead landings, I know there's that tree farm right there. And the name escapes me right now, but that has historically been used as a nesting site for these endangered turtles. And so they're right there in that wetland. So that's all I wanted to add.
Okay, thanks. So the way we ended the site visit with Mass Fish and Wildlife is that Michelle would do weekly roadkill surveys, and that they would look to FY24 to do next spring to do an actual assessment of the population. So that's the plan currently.
So they didn't have any immediate recommendations?
No, in order for them to get involved, they need to show that there's landing turtles there. So.
Yeah,
and has more, Pat Huckabee has more concerns about fish and wildlife in general in that area. So she has my contact information now, so she can get in touch with me. If there's any new, this is the third meeting we've discussed this. So if there's any new comments, I would take those.
Yeah. I've been going into that area for the last 13 years to look for the salamander migrations. And if I, get there on time and the salamanders are crossing the street, I'll help the ones that are about to get run over by a car. And if it's a Friday or a Saturday night when this is happening, cars are just flying through there. It's massive carnage. There are 3 threatened species of salamanders. They live up on the highlands of the land that's being sold there, under the leaf litter and under the logs. And when it's time for them to mate, they cross the street and go over to the vernal pool which they were born. So it makes them extremely vulnerable. So I'm very much in favor of closing that road for several months a year, starting in March. I know that there's a lot against that. I think if we were to do it, we want to have a gate at each end, not just a barrier, so people couldn't drive around it. And it would need to be probably 50 to 100 feet back from the water on the salamander side, because they cross quite a wide swath along there. Carol Decker, last year, we found a 4-toed salamander, which is also a threatened species. So there's blue spotted and occasionally yellow, and then the four toads. So we've got land turtles and then 3 species of salamanders that are all very vulnerable and, you know, they're really suffering from habitat loss and of course, death by cars.
Yeah. And what is your name?
I'm Julie Malco, two-story lane.
Thanks.
Mike's been very supportive. I know Carol Decker contacted him about whether we could be out there and whether maybe they might send a police car down just to sort of help us out, and that's been happening.
Yeah.
So I appreciate that.
Yeah, I think the police department's been very responsive.
Mm.
It's been called.
Incredible. But it's such a, it's a waste of resources and.
It's not a waste, but it is.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I appreciate you guys taking this up, and continuing in mass wildlife, becoming involved, and Chief Dwyer helping as much as he has been. It's encouraging.
Yeah, Nancy?
Hi, I'm Nancy Powell. I live on Ash Street, and I was gonna say that if you're looking into options to try slowing the traffic down, the radar signs do seem to have some impact versus the signs. Another one, I don't know if you are looking into, is a speed table, not a speed bump. There's one at the Hellcat crosswalk on Hawk River Refuge, if you want to check it out. The difference is that it's a gentler ride, but it also forces people to slow down. The speed bumps, what we found is that people slow down and then they speed right back up. And this speed tables do slow them down more, so but have something on both sides because it's such a short section that they will actually drive slowly before they speed up again. So another option to consider.
Are you familiar with that? Mark?
Yeah, I think in some regions of the area, they call it a speed plateau as well, but it just creates a different layer of the operator having to make 1 or 2 decisions not to damage their car. It really makes them think a little bit more.
Yeah, there's different applications for different circumstances.
Yeah.
Some work better than others.
Yeah.
That's why you get other people, traffic calming people to work with you as well, like
Right.
Merrimack Valley Planning.
Yeah.
And
So-
also, okay, just one more thing, sorry, I forgot, I'm hoping that that land can maybe be purchased with CPA funds. Not the house property, but the land itself, because that's where all the turtles are nesting, and that's where the salamanders live when they're not crossing the street.
So, all right, so I think if we could gear our discussion to try and make some decisions, that would be great. Because I don't want to have enough.
It's been going on way too long, so before we can make a decision. Do we have the ability to make a determination on what happens on that road, or is it Mass Fish and Wildlife?
It's the town's road.
Okay,
Yes.
so that's good. So I've been advocating from the beginning. This is not about, it started with geese getting killed, and this is the same scenario every year. In the spring, they come out with 10 or 12 little babies, and by now they're all dead, because there's a lot of people just go flying through there. But it's not about geese or turtles, or even, salamanders. It's also about people, because I walk out there almost every day. The traffic through there is insane quick, and somebody is gonna get hit, killed out there. You just gotta slow the traffic down. The only way I think is reasonable, and probably 3 or 4 years ago, I don't know if it was when Wayne took over DPW, the road gets great. I mean, literally, it's one little pothole. It's beautiful. And traffic has picked up speed much more aggressively over the last 3 or 4 years. And probably a month ago, I'm walking through there one afternoon, and the road's all right around. It's like, this is beautiful. Cars, they actually going slower. And then I see this lady come driving up, and she stops right at the hot top. She's like so slow, and I go, this is what it's all, and you could tell just by having the ruts, it slows traffic, because it's a lot of young males in their vehicles that go flying through there, and they realize they're gonna damage their front end. So I say we either let the road run out to a point where the DPW and the police chief can say, okay, let's do a little upgrading, or my ideal preference would be a series of speed bumps. Maybe a series of 4 or 5, because they have one at the beginning of the road and one at the end. They hit the first one, they're gonna take off, they're gonna hit the last one. You've got to slow the traffic down one way or the other. You can get, I mean, somebody talked about plateau. They just put one in Newburyport on, they just repaved on Plummer Ave, which runs from High Street down to, was it Water Street?
Yeah.
I went down there about 3 days ago, and it's about 5 feet wide, like a big signage. So when you get there, you're gonna slow down, or you're gonna feel it twice. I'm not sure this would work in the swamp because this was a hot top one. That's a feeling, and you could get concrete speed bumps, put them in and be pretty well set with them. So that's what I would, my number one preference,
Speed bumps.
if the town can do it, if the police chief.
Well,
does it.
could, instead of specifying from board of selectmen what the exact thing is, there's probably an application that can be done of something, speed bump, speed tables. We should elect to have someone that can design that.
But we have to decide which. of
Yeah, I
these
know.
Competing priorities we want to try to meet.
Right,
So-
but I'm just saying that I wouldn't go into how many speed bumps, whether it's speed bumps, speed tables.
Okay, I'd say multiple speed bumps to deter speed
Yeah.
with appropriate signage at each end. No speed bumps ahead, because without that, you've got liability.
Yeah, you have to warn people.
Right. That's my preference.
Okay,
Somebody's got something else.
Rick, that's good. You were interested in the radar trailer, right?
Yeah, I personally think that would be, I would expect that to be reasonably effective, particularly in understanding that there won't be a patrol officer there all the time, but particularly that's coupled with a patrol officer on the other side, so that when somebody blows by a speed trailer and they're still going 35 or faster at the far end, and an officer is there and has them on radar and knows that he just went, the driver, I should say, that they just went by, that was a judgment. That they had just gone by a radar that was telling them that they were speeding. And then pick it up, some people are gonna slow down. I know personally, when I see one of those signs, I try to make the sign stop flashing. Not everybody does that, but, some people do that. Some people are gonna learn because it just cost them $100. Nothing's gonna be 100% effective, but I would expect that to be.
Well, without police enforcement, there's certain people not gonna care about the sign. They don't care what the speed limit is, what's blinking.
Yeah.
So.
I like the data collection part of it.
Yeah,
I think
I find that's
really-
interesting too.
Yeah, and if it was just for Ash Street, I don't think I'd be in favor of it.
But it can be deployed anywhere in
throughout
town.
I think
Right,
it's
yeah.
a plus.
Yeah.
And you can do both.
Yeah, Michelle?
Can I just ask, so I understand wanting to make a decision, is this, I think reading through some of the documents on this before, it was kind of like create a short-term strategy and a long-term strategy. And so I don't think doing nothing and delaying and is the right choice. I think these discussions are important. I think these are good tools to use. Is there room to continue having a discussion about a longer term look at that road? So if we put speed bumps in and we put a radar trailer in and people are like, this is great, people are slowing down. Is that the end of this discussion? No, so there's still room to continue the discussion about the surveys and looking for funding to make more meaningful improvements as far as like habitat connectivity and things like that.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's my, I mean,
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean,
Okay.
but I think, we're going to try to, so somebody I read in the packet, somebody had suggested, trying to, thinking that we could use the existing culverts as corridors, but they're not.
They're not for that.
They're not gonna work that way. Is there another way? This is almost a rhetorical question, but it's not really, not fully. Is there another way to put, under road corridors on that road? It's not an easy task, because it's a gravel road, it moves. I mean, there's all sorts of problems associated with that,
yeah.
but
But
is it
that's what the
possible?
funding would mean,
Well,
there's
right.
documentation of endangered, species.
Yeah,
That there's federal funding.
Right,
to do
right.
that.
Unfortunately, it isn't like elk where you put a flyover
Right.
and you let the elk go over the highway. Here, they're turtles, they don't do well out.
So, Michelle, to answer your question, there's a short-term need, pedestrian safety and wildlife safety, but longer term, we're gonna continue to work, I hope you are with Fish and Wildlife.
Yeah, no, I'm hopeful. I was hoping that was the answer.
Yeah, that's, I think we're in agreement there. Short-term, long-term. Chris?
So what's the short term?
Short term, I think we investigate speed bumps and purchase of a radar trailer. The police department keep doing everything they're doing to try to deal with traffic in the area. Anything
About
else?
DPW, they're gonna maintain it.
Well, so that's, I mean, Butch is looking to us for guidance. I'm in favor of letting it go until the police department and Butch deem it to be a hazard to not regrade it. Is that something that you feel comfortable making a judgment on?
Of course.
Yeah, so if you can work with him as to when it needs to be regraded. To me, it's not so much a cost savings, but I think it is a deterrent. at this
Yeah.
point.
Well, it is for some vehicles, but then there are other vehicles, as already been observed, that, you know, there are drivers of large pickup trucks in particular that, you know, there's a lot of travel in the suspension. They're designed to be able to handle that kind of terrain with minimal impact on the person sitting in the driver's seat, and they still fly. But
in terms of installed speed bumps, I don't know how that would work because of the foundation of the road and all of that stuff. So I don't know, is that a DPW thing to look into or?
There's been references in a couple of places, including the MVPC, correspondence said to getting something engineered.
Yeah.
It does seem like it's something we would want to hire a professional.
And that would swamp.
Absolutely, right. Yeah.
So.
And I think certainly from a liability standpoint, and I know, you know, I had spoken to insurance a couple of weeks ago, and they said they're not concerned about liability, provided that all standard bump, you know, speed bump installation. Once I explained to them, signage at the point of the speed bump really isn't feasible. Lighting at the speed bump certainly isn't feasible. That's when they said, well, and you know, they did say they would stand with the town if we put in speed bumps, but obviously you're gonna have a record that it was done with all.
Right, but Merrimack Valley Planning recommended that you get reflective speed bumps, so I mean.
Yeah.
All those things can be addressed, but yes, you should be going to a professional if they have help for you.
So potentially this is a town meeting warrant article to fund the design.
Yeah, I'm not sure how much, yeah, I think it'd be good to find out what I can't think the cost would be that much, and it might be something that could be absorbed, but. Oh, yeah, the permitting, yeah, we should do an article. So.
We'll consider that.
Yeah.
Issues or solutions to protect resource areas.
Yeah.
How you frame it, right? Outreach engagement.
Sorry.
It's okay.
All right, so have we come to partial resolution on the short term issues? Have we come to full resolution on the short term approaching?
Just to let it ride.
Let it ride until the DPW and police department deem that we need to resurface.
Long term.
and then we're gonna do, I don't know what further research we need to do as far as the radar trail is concerned.
We don't,
because
we just need to decide if it's gonna be a warrant article or ARPA funding. That's it.
Okay, and although I like immediate gratification, and we could do that with ARPA funding, just speaking from my own perspective, I would, as we talked about a couple, or maybe a month ago now, I personally would like us to be careful with the ARPA funding right now in the event that it might prove to be useful for pushing us over the top on the Middle Street Bridge, and it's a long way to the top, I'm not even close, but I just, you know, I'd like to give it a few months to see if we can.
You're talking 10 grand versus $2 million.
All right. So perhaps.
Yes, but how many more 10 grand are there gonna be? That's.
Yeah, so Mike, you had talked about other things that we might be able to roll into with that, so. There are other police department things, so maybe if we look at a warrant article that covers the radar trailer, or anything else you have in mind, maybe a study to look at speed bumps. I don't know if that would.
Yeah, I mean, we can all work together to prioritize those.
Yeah, I think that's the way to go.
Yeah, it sounds like, we're past the period of this year where the greatest carnage happened.
Yeah, I haven't seen geese out there and.
Not to dismiss whatever else might, okay?
I've never done a roadkill survey and not found roadkill, and the last roadkill survey I did last Wednesday, and there was 3 turtles. They weren't living turtles, but there was 3 turtles. And they were all small turtles, so I think they weren't like this year's hatchlings, but moving around trying to find their habitat, so the cute fluffy fledglings were maybe out of there, but there was 3 turtles, a bird, 2 snakes, a frog, and a mouse.
Wow.
So it's every time, I've never gone and not found roadkill.
You count the mice?
I count everything that is roadkill and then I remove it from the road, so I do not recount it again.
All right.
That road, that's little stretch, not just for turtles, but all wildlife. Because it's between the 2 wetlands, it's basically a basking log for everything, whether it's wood ducks, snakes, frogs, turtles, etc. Especially in the spring when the water on either side is cooler, the gravel road heats up, so everything is out basking. And that's when you have the most carnage.
Yeah, it's much less of a crossing situation like on many roads. It's much less of a crossing situation and more of a resting, protected type, what they think is a protected sunning area situation.
Okay.
Just a question on, for instance, the purchase of a trailer. How much was the quote on that?
12,000.
12,000, so you'd want to go to town meeting. The engagement of someone who could specify what you might do for speed bumps, speed tables in the road. You don't have current funding. You don't have the ability within your current budget to fund that, to kick that off right away.
Well, there is within the select board budget, there's some small amount for.
Just a couple thousand.
It's 10,000 a year of professional technical services is all there's, but the answer is no, there's not like.
We didn't know.
That's why it's not gonna cost 10,000 for that, but, okay, fine. So I just, my question was really about considering whether there are available funds right now.
I don't think there are.
That's all. That's all. So if there isn't, sorry.
Tiger shift in that.
So you run a very tight ship. You gotta give me that.
All right, any other comments?
That damn FinCom, I think.
Angus, anything?
No.
All right. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Okay, Concom, I guess you guys done?
Yeah, what was the Greenbelt one? Is that worth sticking around for? It was a ways down, so if not, maybe I'm happy.
That's just to have a table set up at the, yeah.
You should let us have a table. I'm happy to be here for that.
All right. The next item, discussion of the potential to join Northeastern Mass Law Enforcement Council. So we just dropped in a note from their webpage. If you can provide any further.
Yeah, so this is a group of law enforcement agencies. I don't know if you saw on the website, the map. I mean, we're pretty much surrounded by, NEMLAC communities.
NEMLAC, that's.
That's the acronym, and yeah. But really, we're looking at this is, I feel strongly about joining this group. A lot of the planning and pre-planning that we do in the town, they offer services that we hope we would never use. But having a regional school, having an elementary school, and then having a lot of wide open space, there's always going to be the potential of a long duration emergency response. This is just an organization that provides us with additional resources we would be a member community. And we're a small department, we have a small fire department, we have a small police department, easily overwhelmed if we had ever had an incident that involved, major crisis in town. Again, I don't want to even speak to that. Having this being now that speaking of Cape Cove, this is the 50th year of the wires being in the town. Things have certainly changed. It's 2023. We have to focus on how we respond to things in town. So we would enter into an agreement with them. There's a fee of $5,000 that the police department will be responsible for. We could also have opportunities to help with training for our officers. My focus would be school safety, having our SRO trained through NEMLAC. They offer what's called the STARS program, which offers a lot of preventative training and planning for schools, all the different layers of emergencies that can happen at schools. And then there's some opportunities that could support us locally as well. So we have the apple harvest race coming up. We have the Memorial Day parade they would be one additional, tool to have for us to help, primarily with traffic control.
So, in this map, Groveland is not a member,
Groveland is not, no.
Merrimack is,
Yeah.
okay.
Why would towns not be members?
It's really choice, whether or not they want to participate, and I don't know. My personal feeling is that we have, we're just the town of Western Grid South. We already had 2 incidents this year that were proved to be long duration events. And we just didn't have the local additional support, whether it's for the incident at hand or if it was for providing support to the community. So really over the last year, I've been sort of drilling down, looking at what we have currently, we're capable of managing, and what support systems we need to have moving forward. And this is definitely one of them.
Are there any other organizations that do similar duplicate service that other towns might be members of? I just don't know why it wouldn't be.
Well, I mean, we have a good working relationship with the state police. They obviously provide support as well. What this is gonna open up to us is just additional support to our staff. We would have one officer would be assigned, and or the chief would be assigned to a certain role within NEMLAC. In this particular case, I'd be focused on school safety, and then tying in the school resource officer to that as well. So they provide a lot of after action support, crisis response, whether it's to schools to help with staffing incidents or police involvement, or even fire and rescue.
Is it reciprocal participation of offices, like if another town had an issue that because you're in this organization?
Yes.
You send officers to?
Yep, so we would provide one officer to be utilized for both training and for response. And again, it would be most likely due to be part of the school safety arm.
$5,000 fee, that's annually, not one time.
Anyway, yep.
And so with that, that's not in the current budget, obviously, so could we be joining next year?
I mean, we could make it work. We could make it work this year.
And is there any, would this be reasonable to ask the school district to provide part of this if it's primarily used for school?
I think at the end of the day, it would be my responsibility. I mean, they do provide us a lot of support on the school resource officer side of things. I would just be happy to get our staff moving in a good direction. And the nice thing about this too is they provide support to us. They're not coming into West Newbury taking over any control that any of us have in public safety. This would be just more support, providing us with the professionals that do this on a regular basis that we don't often have because of our size and our call.
Rick, do you have questions, or-
Yeah, I did. Okay, so.
I mean, it's pretty striking how many.
So I'm just thinking about the other Pentucket communities, and so Groveland is not a participant, Merrimack is, and we are not yet.
Oh, I'm sorry, I just noted Patricia Reeser had her hand raised. I'm assuming that probably goes back to the prior discussion.
Tricia, are you still there?
Yes, I am. I had a question. Does the 5,000 a year pay for not only membership, but also any assistance we get from the member communities?
So we would take on that similar to other, anytime we have an investigation, that officer is going to be paid either on duty or for overtime purposes. So that would be.
Sorry, so the officers from the other community would be paid for by us?
No, they would not.
Oh,
They're
okay.
on-
Yeah, that was my question.
Yeah, an interesting story that one of the area chiefs explained to me was they had a missing person that turned into a multi-day search for the individual. And at the end of the day, they were responsible for their own costs, their own town costs, but the cost from the NEMLAC response, which was quite large and worth all its weight in gold, was not anything that the town was responsible for. So looking at this from a sort of a dollars and cents perspective, $5,000 is a pretty good insurance policy for us to have at a phone call away.
Not to
again,
mention the training and.
Yeah. And having looked at that map, these member agencies are coming from local areas. We have areas, we have individuals within the school district that have these specialized trainings that we'll be utilizing. So it's, again, I feel very strongly.
Thanks.
Any other questions?
I'm trying to recall somewhere. I personally, I think this is probably a good idea. But I'm trying to recall where somewhere in the last 10 years, there was coverage about an issue that involved NEMLAC. And I don't recall, but I can't recall what it was or where it was, but it was kind of controversial at the time. And did they have like a, was it like a rapid response SWAT kind of team that they had at some point or something like that? No?
There's been so many through even like the last 10, 15, 20 years, there's been so many
Yeah.
redos within law enforcement.
Yeah, okay.
But they do have a SWAT team.
That is one of their, that is,
Yeah. And I just recall that it was controversial at the time, and I don't remember why. It's just sitting way back there in the back of my mind.
But that's where I think the chief's point about that they're there to support, not that the chief is still in charge.
Right, so do you want to make a motion?
Yeah.
Do we need a motion?
Well, this is, so I really, the chief approached, he brought this to my attention. We were at the chief's breakfast a couple of months ago, and I think it's within his operating budget, but I think if we go forward, I would expect that operating budget to increase in FY 25 because it wasn't specifically budgeted. So I thought it would be good to specifically, share the idea with the board. I don't think the board's vote is needed, but I did want to make sure that before taking on what would expect to be a baseline expense, $5,000 a year.
I think we should make a motion to do it as a show of support.
Sure, yeah, endorsing the is good, yeah.
All right. Go ahead.
Make a motion that we endorse the chief to join, his vision to join NEMLAC.
Second.
All right, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mike.
All right, the next item is a discussion of the MVP action grant status. So is that an update from Newbury or from Angus? We have the memo from Christine Long. I don't think she's on.
No, she's not.
Yeah. He kind of summarized,
Yeah.
Is there anything that we need to add or any action you're looking for?
It seems like there's, obviously I was out of town last week, but from, a week and a half ago to this memo, it seems like there's been a lot of good thinking going on, both with staff, volunteers, as well as the anticipated, consultants to think about how we could still substantially, if not completely, advance the objectives of the grant within the current fiscal year. Obviously, the initial grant applications spread it out through FY 25, which would have been a more comfortable timetable, but the consultants have verified their capacity to complete the work on a shorter schedule. And it seems like, we're within reach of being able to maybe fully accept the grant. When I left for vacation, a week and a half ago, it seemed like we might be better off to accept a reduced grant. But based on the progress that's been made, it sounds like, most, if not all, of the objectives could be satisfied. But no question, it's going to need to be a major focus of time this fiscal year. We all knew that anyway.
Right. Yeah, so, originally, we had anticipated, the way the grant was applied for, we anticipated we'd have about 21 months. The balance of this fiscal year and then, and FY 25 as well. And that was how everything was planned out from a timing standpoint. Now we're down, that's changed from 21 months to about 9 months. That's pretty significant change. So, I wasn't in a phone call Christine has had numerous phone calls, as has Elisa Grammer, with, the consultant and also with, the MVP folks. But, it looks like we've gotten to a point where things can be rearranged, timing can be changed, there will be fewer in-person meetings, with, in certain cases, with Zoom meetings substituted. And, things will be done in such a way to expedite and combine functions. Probably perhaps the biggest thing, the most difficult things to reorder are, site condition observation. So we now are much more constrained in terms of the time frame we have to do that, as well as communication with the public. But it looks like we'll have a viable plan, something that'll work.
So we were always imagining it was gonna be a big drain on resources. Is this gonna be an even bigger drain?
I don't think it's gonna make a big difference to town staff. There probably will be some more volunteer effort required at this point, and the consultants are gonna have to, they may actually have to take on, in certain aspect or certain areas, take on additional resources. Whether they contract with somebody else, but I don't expect it to make a dramatic difference in terms of town staff time. Christine obviously is gonna have to be focused on it. But, she already, I think she has, her thoughts pretty well arranged on it already.
Chris, any thoughts or questions? Yeah. Well, I'm glad that you feel like we can work this out and still, not reduce the scope significantly. So, so the next step is a meeting with Michelle sometime this week. Review the revised scope and then resubmit. Great. Okay.
Yeah, they had, when Christine and I had a call with Michelle at MVP, about a week and a half ago, we had agreed that by around next Tuesday, we hope to have the scope worked out. We had agreed we'd connect with her in the meantime to make sure we're on the right track, and I think we are.
Right.
Yeah, one of the things that we have to do now that we didn't have to do before is there's been a conscious decision to not track volunteer hours. So that's in-kind value, but it was gonna be additional overhead, and we had already allocated $50,000, and we're applying for $150,000 from the state, which met the $200,000 that we needed for the plus or minus for the contract with GEI Consultants and their subcontractor for communications, but the MVP program now wants us to track volunteer and staff time and account for it all. I think that's somewhat for their own internal purposes in terms of, looking at buy-in from communities and making sure that, you have community commitment. Beyond the dollars invested, that you also have community commitment. So it makes one additional thing that has to be tracked. Which is kind of a pain, but.
I'm sure there's a system you can set up with
Right.
time fees or something.
Right, yeah, no, we'll put it together. It was in this
It was a
year, but
conscious choice.
it was a conscious choice. I was actually the person who said, we really ought to count, but then I bought it, I was like, okay, I understand, there's a lot else to track here. But now, we've been told we need to do that.
You were right.
Well. Yeah, exactly. Every once in a while, you come up rosy.
All right. All right, anything else on that item? Okay, next item is the request from Essex County Greenbelt to authorize fundraising activities and install a temporary sign. And Kathy is here. Hi, Kathy.
Hi. Yes.
Sorry for the long wait.
No problem. I love listening to the invasive species interns work. Very, very impressive. So we're here to specify a temporary sign and request that we have a temporary sign up for fundraising for the Sawmill Brook project. And also if we can table at your summer bandstand concerts for 2 of those on Thursday nights coming up.
Yeah, so the details we provided in the letter. So our temporary sign policy is 4 weeks. We've done 4 weeks consecutively or 2 weeks. So I think your original request is probably, it is too long, August 19th, November 1st. So if you can work within our existing sign policy, that would be appreciated. Did you see the sign locations, everybody? Do we have any issues with those? That's all town and right? Chris, any issues?
No, the locations, no.
Okay. With the sign, yes?
Under the scan code.
Oh, okay.
Just the personal beef, because
Yeah, so there was discussion at the last meeting, Kathy, about the QR code. And that, I guess there's instances of those being hacked now, and just whether that was a good idea to have that on the sign. Is that your concern?
yeah, it's in my preferences just to have the website link. I mean,
Yeah.
it can generate revenue, I understand that, but it also is very easily hacked.
Mhm.
That's a new scam that's out there, so.
Sure, if you would like us to take that off, we definitely can. We have not had any incidents with QR codes, and we have them out on a lot of our properties, just as a sort of anecdotal information, but we're happy to take it off and just put the website if web address, if that's your preference. Happy to do that.
Is the risk to be rebuilt? Oh.
I can't hear anything you are saying now. I can hear little bits and pieces, but
So the question is, who does this create a risk for? Is it Greenbelt or the town? And the comment was made that it's to the people who might be using this QR code. So,
yeah.
And I'm not comfortable endorsing something that puts potential citizens.
They've agreed to take it off.
yeah. Okay, if it's not a big issue for you, I think then we don't have to keep talking about it.
Okay, that's fine. We're happy to take that off and just put the web address itself. No problem.
Okay, I have on the table, where, do you have a location where you think you might be placing it? I was just wondering about that.
You know, I have never been to one, but Annie Madden and Paulina Swartz had offered to join us at one of those, and Vanessa Johnson Hall will be at one of the evenings too. So I don't know what the layout is there at those concerts. We're happy to put it wherever people think it's not in the way yet. Obviously, we'd love to get some people to come by, particularly if they have questions. So if you have any suggestions, we're happy to.
I mean, there's you walk in off of the lot, I mean, and you can go, I think on the right-hand side there would probably be the best place. I mean, the fire department is set up with their drill and stuff up to the left, but I mean, I think that would work.
I just thought it'd be good to define the location.
Okay.
So that sounds good to you?
Well, I mean, I haven't been to one this year, but I assume things are still done the same that they were last year. And they were here before that.
All right, any thoughts about the location?
I trust the Andy man to put it in the right place.
Right.
well, the right place for maximum green belt exposure, but that may not be the right place.
As long as it's not directly in front of the van, how's that?
Be discreet, okay?
Well, we'll just grab the mic a few times. It won't be a big deal.
So just out of curiosity, not to put pressure on here, but there's one this Thursday too. You can't make that one
That's
up?
what I was thinking too.
I don't think we can actually. We were hoping to, but I don't think we have the people power. We have an event at Greenbelt that's happening until the evening, and they'd really like to have a Greenbelt representative. So I think we'll do it on the 17th and the 24th. And hopefully, good weather and good turnout on those nights. Can't hear.
What this more means. Yeah, so let's just say, start rotating the signs. I don't.
Our personal properties,
Yeah, exactly, right.
but easement is not.
I'm sorry, I'm missing all of this. I can't hear any of you. I could hear the whole meeting until now, so maybe it's something on my end.
I think for your purposes, the signs where you've indicated are fine, that this was just a discussion of what you could do outside of the 4-week window with the signs. That put on
Okay.
people's property.
Yeah, they can go to other people to put up.
Yeah, that's beyond.
Thank you. Yes, we are talking about that. We might ask Chris Grant to put something at his farm stand, or, where there's a lot of visibility coming through. And Rick, was it your suggestion to do a thermometer that looks like a sawmill wheel?
Yeah, I think I might have said that. Yeah.
That's a great idea. So we'll think about this.
Yeah, so actually, I was gonna make it in your shop.
Oh, go for it.
You got any tools left, or did you sell them all?
All right, any other questions for Kathy? All right.
Oh, well, just a suggestion, would it make sense for, when the signs are not deployed on town properties? So there are a handful of greenbelt properties in town. Would it make sense to, those are potential places you could put them up?
Yeah, that's a great idea.
Yeah.
I think that's a wonderful idea. We'll do that.
Because the people going there would be people who would probably be interested in additional open space acquisition.
I think that's a wonderful idea. Thank you. We will do that. So just to clarify then, the August 19th to September 2nd is okay?
Yes.
And then are we able to put them out again September 17th to October 1st for a second 2-week time period?
Yes,
Great.
total of 4 weeks. Yeah.
Okay, wonderful.
All right. Somebody want to make a motion? Please.
Sure, make a motion to approve Greenbelt's request to post signage and to set up a display at the August 17th and August 24th bandstand, town bandstand music nights.
Exception of the QR code.
Right, okay, with the exception of the QR code as shown on the signs in the packet. I guess that's it.
Good, second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, thank you, Kathy.
Thank you very much. Have a good night.
Thank you. All right, the next item, you guys still awake?
Carol, you were yawning, and I was gonna ask you to stop.
Oh, good, because we just have a couple more things to do.
Yeah. So many of these items had either town staff or board or committee members. It was hard we try to take staff first and then committee. So thank you for waiting. Appreciate it. All right. So the next topic is discussion of a draft memorandum of understanding between the Board of Water Commissioners and the Select Board. So this is for the purchase of the pipeline materials for the Church and Prospect Street project. The select board approved the use of $625,000 to purchase the pipe in advance to try to get a good deal on it. So with the stipulation that there'd be some kind of agreement between the two parties about how the funds would be used and accounted for and all of that. So we have in the packet a letter from our attorney, special counsel on water issues, Mayor's in Harrington, just with some suggestions about how to approach this. She recommended a memorandum of understanding, and she gave us 2 examples, and so I drafted the one that's in the packet and sent to you. And actually Angus got started this, so I just put some details in there. So Angus, you probably have not even had a chance to look at this yet.
I did read it today. I thought it was great. I mean, it was, substantially similar to the kind of template, but it included some language that, and I talked with Jenny as well.
Okay.
She thought it was good.
Okay, I incorporated some of the stuff from the 2 examples, as well as some of the details. So did you have any thoughts, Chris, on this and any of the details?
No.
The one, item number 5, contracts. This says that the town will have signing authority on contracts rather than the Board of Water Commissioners, so that's a different from how you usually manage your project. So that's, I think, a point of discussion. Did you have any other thoughts on any of the items, Bob or Mark?
I have a couple,
Okay.
but we haven't met as a board to discuss any of this.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't want to say anything tonight that's,
So my thought on that, I know you're trying to set up a meeting for this week. We want to get this signed as soon as possible so we can pay Tatum and Howard for the work that they've done. So I want to get away.
we also want to do that.
Yeah.
I also want to
Yeah, I'm sure.
Board, and I want to discuss it.
So if you want, my point was if you wanted to offer your input, knowing that it doesn't represent the board, if that's stuff that this board is in agreement with, that might cut down on some of the back and forth.
All right, I have one. Under number 8. Item B.
Yeah.
I think we need to find out whether or not what we're doing is legal or not before we even sign it. Instead of signing this, doing this, and everything else, and then find out we have to go to court because something was done wrong. It implies that if a court finds that what we did was illegal, then there's all kinds of hell with it, my friends. But I think we ought to sit down and figure out whether or not there's going to be that kind of an issue or not before we even sign it. I mean, it implies there may be. And I'd rather, if we have to, get legal counsel of our own lawyers.
Okay, this is just a standard language.
It may be, I
Okay.
don't like that particular. I want to know if we're going into this, that, we did have, pipe in the ground, and all of a sudden, oh, wait a minute, you can't do that. It's a little bit late to figure out now that it's not right. I'd rather have that clarified.
Okay. I'm not sure I follow the.
Yeah, I mean, it's the standard language, but to the question, Bob, both legal counsel and our consultant had previously advised it's a completely appropriate and lawful use of the funds, so that's not a.
Is that what you're saying?
Well, what I'm saying is, my understanding, well, it says in here, basically. That in the event that a court or competent jurisdiction issues a final binding conclusive judgment that the grant or the funds is described in the MOI violates the law. All right, then the recipient shall be liable to pay the town. Let's find out whether or not it violates any laws before we sign anything.
Yeah, I think that's what Angus is saying. 2 attorneys have advised us that this is an appropriate use of ARPA funds.
Then why is that in there?
It's the standard language for contract.
Well, we wanted to discuss it before we.
All right, so there's the understanding that then your board will make comments and then they'll come back to our board at.
I'd like to meet, I think it's Thursday.
Okay,
So that is definitely the agenda.
okay. Any other potential concerns that you have with any of the language in here?
That's the only one that really stuck out.
Okay. What about the contract signing? Is that a concern for you?
I have looked through, we have, the Board of Water Commissioners from time immemorial, as far as I know, has signed every contract pertaining to, you know, anything that goes on in the water department. I looked through the Acts of 1936. It does not spell out specifically that we are authorized to sign the contract. We can sign contracts with the report, Groveland, Bayfield, Byfield, for water.
Right.
As far as contract putting pipe in the ground, it doesn't give us, or it doesn't spell that out. So I'm not sure.
Yeah, I think the thinking on this was that these are not water department funds, these are town funds, and that's why the select board or the town manager would be the signature.
But yeah, just for the purchasing of the pipe.
Yeah, just the
By
things,
project, not just for the purchasing of the bike.
just for the ARPA funds.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But of course, if we're borrowing money, I mean, the water department is responsible for it, but ultimately, if the water department were to default, the town would then be responsible.
Yeah, no, I understand it. I understand that.
Yeah.
It's just that, you know, well, like I said, this is just my own personal opinion.
Fair enough.
The rest of us have not met or even discussed it, so.
Bob's the only one I've had a chance to meet with.
Okay.
With this, so
Okay,
Jack and Larry have not been up to the office yet.
so did you email this to Jack?
I asked Jody to do that, and I don't know whether she has yet or not. Because I asked her to make sure that both of the other two got it.
It just-
Legal went out today, I've had some issues with DEP today, so I kind of dropped the ball on this one, so, but.
Yeah, so at least that way, if they have a chance to look at it before your meeting.
Right,
it'll be a
that's
more
what we
productive
were, that's what we're trying to do. get
That's
this one.
what I asked you to do, was at least get it out so that they had a. So it wasn't walking in and saying, oh, hey, read this.
Right.
Make a decision.
So do you think it would be useful to have a member of the select board and Angus at that meeting, so there can be a discussion, or would you rather talk about it yourself?
I was open for discussion, and it's
Yeah.
like,
I was trying to streamline this, so.
yeah.
Is that something?
I personally don't have a problem. Like I said, we want to discuss all of it,
Sure.
and so that we're all on the same page. That's all.
Okay. Are you able to go to?
Yeah, well, yeah, I don't know what time.
I'm not sure. I think it's Thursday, but you know, I haven't worked today, I got to work tomorrow, so maybe I'll just.
Yeah.
Usually you meet first thing in the morning, right? Or is this?
Exactly.
1 o'clock, I believe, if I want Thursday.
Okay. I
Okay.
don't know, I'll have to look through it.
Can I get a couple things on Thursday? So.
Like I said, I haven't seen it being posted yet, so
Okay.
I don't want to.
I think it's, this is there and it's. Oh my God. Yeah.
So if it's 1 o'clock, I might be able, it's at 1, you said?
Well, I gave her a couple of choices. I mean, I have a doctor's appointment on Wednesday, so if we wouldn't do it on Wednesday, I couldn't do it until after 1 o'clock. The rest of the 2 days were fine, so.
All right, if you can let Angus know.
We'll
All right, Angus, any other things from that? We want
No, I mean, when it comes to the contract, there were a couple of things that, I mean, for one thing, it's, I think, gonna be really helpful. I notated Howard understands this as well, that to have a contract that begins with the use of the funds rather than being an extension of a prior
Yeah.
contract. But also, you know, I'm definitely gonna wanna understand the basis of the $15,000, cost proposal to do this work, because the original contract that Peyton Howard signed provided for bidding and it provided for all of these services. Obviously, there's gonna be some incremental effort to do with separately bidding the materials from the whole project, but where that was already embedded in the underlying fee, I was surprised to see an amount of 15,000. It also had a time of performance of 600 days from signing the agreement, which I'm sure was just boilerplate language, but that's not actually what we're doing, so I would like to see that.
Well, actually, they increased, I mean, wasn't that originally 180 days or something? And
Well, that was in the original contract, and then this is in the revision of was within 600 days, and just as a general principle, I would tend to start with a preference for time and materials rather than a lump sum contract.
Yeah.
So there's a couple of things that I think, you know, we're accountable, this board's accountable for how the funds are spent. Obviously, we want to see as much of that 625,000 going toward actual pipe, which is what, you know, I think people understand there's some stock costs associated with that, but again, we're bidding and bid specs was already part of their underlying contract, which has already been amended 3 times. You know, 15,000 seems to me to be a lot for what we're asking them to do. And so I personally would not sign a contract like that without really understanding what's driving that. And again, I'm gonna definitely say I would much rather do time and materials rather than some.
Okay. So was that your understanding, Bob, that the bid spec preparation was part of that amendment?
I can't remember how Mike left it when he left. I thought it was all part of that, but again, I'm not 100% sure.
Okay.
Mike Schultz is that.
I think
Jane Howard said no. Well, it is part of the base contract, but that was bidding out the construction. You know, I understand, and I understand there's an incremental cost. I totally understand that. It takes some time to bid it out separate in separate pieces. It just 15,000 seems like a lot for that.
Right.
If it was already part of the base contract to put the whole project out to bid, how much additional effort, and it's some, and it might be 5,000. I don't know what the number is, but 15 seems like. Yeah, I agree with you on that.
Okay. Any other contract issues that you want to talk about?
Nope.
Okay. All right, anything else you guys want to talk about on the opera?
There's nothing on the website, at least not on the homepage. Sometimes it.
Why
homepage? Let's see. Nah.
That wasn't okay.
Okay, so at least Angus will be there and hopefully one of the board members and hash out some of these issues and we'll bring it to the next select board meeting. So Tate and Howard is fine. Well, not fine, but.
Yeah, they understand. Yeah. And, you know, I think everyone understands once contracts are signed, they have to go to the town accountant because that's state law for one thing, but secondly, when invoices are being put through for payment, she's looking back to make sure, you know, especially for anything of any amount, that there's an underlying contract that covers that. So without her having that on file, it slows down the processing of invoices, but more importantly, it's state law that every executed contract be filed there. When I started 5 years ago, very few contracts were there, and now I thought they all were, because I thought we've been really clear about that, and it was a surprise to find out there was a contract and multiple amendments.
Okay, yeah.
And with a couple of those, no indication that the Water Commission as a board had approved those amendments prior to them being signed. That was a question I had as well.
Okay, so going forward, all contracts need to go to the town accountant? Yeah, okay. Especially, I mean, all should, but definitely the opera, we have to make sure. Okay, great, well, thank you for sticking around.
Right. Oh, it's okay.
I told Wendy a bit about what you've been doing with, and you're doing great work.
Park is coming in tomorrow, so we may be saved tomorrow. I talked to one of the sales reps and they're like, I have 2 of them in my basement, maybe I'll put something together. And
What meter is it?
so my continuous monitoring meter, that
For what?
does pH and turbidity, pH and chlorine.
Chlorine.
Yeah, so we're monitoring it, hourly, every couple hours.
Good luck.
Yeah, thank you for the mark. Good night, all. Good night.
Okay, I scrolled back to look for the contacts and now I lost the page. You know where we are?
We're at 59.
It's that solar study is taking up the whole middle of it.
Yeah, it's great job.
What is the next item? Oh, the personnel policy, okay. So, did you both see the comments that Angus forwarded today?
Yeah.
Was that the only comments you received, Angus?
It was.
Oh, sure.
You see that?
Yeah.
The whole thing is black.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was watching your screen before, it was like moving on its own. It was
Yeah.
like some food going on over
Yeah,
there.
I know. Okay. So one question I had is, would it be unusual for us to just say that we'll pay for all jury duty? I mean, it seems arbitrary to say 3 days or 5 days. I mean, do towns do that? I know in private business, jury duty is just covered because the state only offers you $50. So I don't know how people can survive on $50 a day.
I've had it in private.
No,
Since I
Well,
worked for a company and they didn't cover it.
all companies I've worked for have, so maybe it's not the standard, but
I gotta go back and tell my boss how terrible he was.
yeah. It's just a question. Do you have any from other towns you've worked in, Angus? What if their policy?
I don't know. It hasn't come up.
Okay. Well, 5 days is certainly better than 3.
I would say leave it at the 5, and if we have the issue again, we can make the exception that we just recently did, rather than leaving it as an open policy.
Yeah, I mean, I thought Caitlin's suggestion to specify 5, but to allow, the town manager to review
Yeah.
exceptions to that, just so we're not chasing our own tail with amending this policy. I like that. It would give some discretion. Obviously, I would never, and either I or anyone else in this position in the future would abuse that.
Was this the email you're referencing earlier?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, she had suggested including wording, which I don't necessarily love the exact wording, but she said maybe reviewed by the town manager or appointing authority on a case-by-case basis. If an employee is selected for a longer trial outside of 5 days, that way, if an employee gets selected for a long trial, you will feel like the policy needs to be revised again. I mean, if someone is called into a grand jury, I understand that it can take 30 days or more. I've never been involved with that, but
So should we just have the town manager instead of the appointing authority? I think there needs to be some consistency, so it would be better to just have one person be making those judgment calls.
I mean, Wendy, to your point, I think as long as the employee is presenting documentation that they're doing this, it doesn't seem right that they be financially penalized for performing their civic duty. Obviously, you want to make sure there's no room for abuse in that, but as long as there's documentation, this.
Let's provide that documentation. They tell you when you were there and they present it to the employer.
Yeah, right.
There's no game in the city.
Right.
So would you change the language then, or just leave it at 5 days?
I think if the board added a sentence, after the first sentence along the lines of, in extraordinary circumstances where an employee is called to serve for a period greater than 5 days, the town manager may authorize payment of their regular wages during, upon documentation of their service, something like that.
I like that with the documentation.
Yeah. I think it's only gonna come up very rarely, and yet,
Yeah.
in the last week, we had an employee called the jury duty for eight or 9 days. This all started with an employee who was called for 5 days, and so, as you know, brought to the board to increase from 3 days in the policy, and then within a matter of a couple of weeks, we have a second employee who's gonna be on jury duty for 8 or 9 days, and I feel that person shouldn't be financially penalized for that.
Or required to use vacation.
Right,
time
or, right,
personal
right,
day or
right.
whatever. Yeah, I like that language. If
I mean,
people are comfortable staying unlimited, then keep it at 5 and then have you review anything longer than that.
You know, I think,
Town manager after the documentation provided. Yeah.
yeah, I think, Caitlin went on in her email to, draw a distinction between salaried and hourly employees, and well, I think she's correct. I don't think that needs to get into the policy, but I think the point she was getting at is if you're a salary employee, even if you're on jury duty, you're probably on your smartphone, you're probably doing some amount of work. As opposed to hourly where you really need to be there for every hour that you're paid. But I think that gets much more nuanced than we need to be in the policy.
And then that last sentence, you're right, it does say that you're required to report for work if you're released before the end of the day.
Yeah.
That was one concern that somebody mentioned.
Well, and actually, I kind of understand that if somebody can. It depends upon where you live and where the court is and where relative to the office, but it could just be kind of silly for somebody to. If they lived in Georgetown and they drive to Salem. And then turn around and, they were released after 4 hours and had to drive back up here to spend 2 hours here and could just go home and work from home. Is that, how practical is it for people to work from home?
That's a whole other
I guess
set of
that's
issues.
I think having that statement in there is good, and then at the discretion of their department manager, they could always check in on that. I don't have any other.
I haven't been, in the last 3 months, haven't been down to Salem for jury duty and haven't been through it.
Yeah.
Was released after 4 hours.
Chris, any further comments on this?
Put the wording in, I guess make the decision. Sounds good.
Okay. Do you need a motion?
Yes.
Make a motion that we accept modifying the personnel policy relative to jury duty as stated, but with adding the wording. Town manager can authorize longer durations with the documentation provided by the courts.
Second. All right, all those in favor?
All right.
All right, that's another personnel policy done, right, Angus?
Yeah. Thank you.
All right, next item, discussion of select board, town manager goals and priorities. All right, so I just use a straight numbering system and averaging. I'm a numbers person.
So what happens when somebody didn't fill in stuff?
So it's not counted, so if you give me, if you want to update yours, I'll put it in here and recalculate.
It was funny, I was going through looking at the numbers and I'm coming up with the numbers, how do we get that number? 2.5, how does that work? It means the total is 7.5, but there has to be an individual.
Wait, did you not read my explanation?
I did, but like, where the priority is 2.5? How do you, we don't need to go into this, but.
So we can, so if you said a 1, I said a 2, and Chris said a 3, or some.
That's 6.
Right,
But
so for
there were numbers here where there was no way giving. There was, with 3 people putting numbers in, there was no way to get to that.
I certainly didn't make it up.
No, I think there were ones where Chris didn't put anything in.
This
That's
was
quite
the
a
whole
few.
point, okay, yes. Yeah, so if you go
That
to
was
the
what I
end.
was.
Okay.
When I first went through it, I was like, how did you get that number?
9:54. Okay. Yeah, so there were several that Chris did not feel like he had background on, so.
Correct, and there's some that I still put numbers in, I had no idea.
Well, that's not good. So I don't know that we want to drill down into all this tonight. My purpose was to just get something together. And if there are any specific ones that we want to discuss, maybe discuss it tonight.
Two big picture over
Sure.
arching views
Yep.
first.
Yep.
Number one, I think the info we're missing, which I would like, would be from Angus.
Mhm.
What does he feel is priority?
Okay.
And also, what does he have the ability to accomplish in the timeframes we're discussing? Because we can have pipe dreams all day long, then if we flip it over to him because you're crazy, that won't help us. So I sort of think your input is as valuable as ours. That's number one. The other thing, and it's not on here, and I hope it's being addressed, but my number one priority or concern, whatever you want to call it, is that all our town computers, our internet systems are secured at the highest level. If we can't get hacked, we're not gonna have ransomware and attacks and have our system shut down. But that's not encompassed here anywhere. That is to me the number one priority and fear that would keep me awake at night for the town.
So I'm sure Angus has more to say about this, but that is something that we've worked on. So I think there was a reasonable amount of effort put in to try to make sure that we had the best security that we could. And Angus, you can elaborate more than me, but.
Yeah, there's just nothing in here on, I trust it's there.
Yeah, but going back 3 years, Archie and I both had that, and we brought it up independently, I think. And, you know, then there was effort expended, you know, using our IT, you know, Jake Susie, our IT consultant, and as well as participation in the state program. And now, I think Christian participates. He's our cybersecurity, dude, and that's the right term.
I'm pretty sure it's not.
So he, I think, has participated in training offered by, is it, MMA or?
No, it was a state agency. Yeah, so just on that second one, it's super important. And if you go back to a couple of years ago and some of these kind of laundry lists that I put together of projects and initiatives, when I did this most recent one a month or so ago and sent it to you all, I had divided it because in looking back at my own work, I realized that it was a blend of what I refer to as baseline work that just kind of has to get done day in, day out regardless. We're mixed in with more projects and initiatives. And so I felt that not only did that result in a, you know, too long list, but it also kind of presents the option of choice on the baseline stuff when those are things that are either required by law or required by bylaw or by sometimes even by custom, but they're part of your job. They're not special. So ransomware and IT security, that's all part of the baseline. And that's the thing we all need to remember. Everything we're looking at here is actually just.
I know, when I saw this.
Yeah, so no, it is, if you look at the Excel spreadsheet I sent around a few weeks ago, it is definitely part of the baseline, and we did go through a year-long optional program with a state agency where basically everybody on staff was required to do a certain number of online trainings over the course of the year, and part of that was the state actually would send out phishing or kind of you know, bogus stuff, you know, surreptitiously, and you would actually get graded based on, you know, how many people clicked on it, because the single biggest weakness, you can do everything you want with the software and ransomware and all that, but it's your people. That's really the biggest exposure. All it takes is one employee clicking a malicious link, and that can you know, bring down everything. So I think, well, Rick's correct, a significant investment was made, and Kristen's job description was changed to basically make that part of the baseline responsibilities, which up till that, it wasn't part of anyone's job specifically, other than implicitly. So we have kind of built it in the baseline, but at the same time, we ought to be doing those things maybe not every year, but probably every 2 years or every 2 or 3 years, because if people's knowledge gets stale or there's new emergent threats that you're not keeping your staff current on, that's gonna be your biggest exposure. So it definitely is, you know, it needs to be a continued focus. And I mean, just today, I sent something over to Jake and Christian because there was a suspicious looking message on our Facebook page, and you know, I know that we're not, as a public agency, actually supposed to delete any comments because that's all public record. It was so clearly a malicious link, and I deleted the comment and blocked the person because but before doing that, I sent it over to Jake and Christian just to let them know what I was doing. And you know, I think in the course of a given, you know, month, there's probably a half dozen, you know, things that I'm aware of, never mind what other staff might be aware of that they don't tell me about. But I think everybody knows if they see something, they send it to Jake, or sometimes they'll just do a screenshot and send it so they don't perpetuate the problem of sending out.
It's a better idea.
But no, your point's well taken. To your initial comment, I'd love to have that discussion in a future meeting. Obviously, it's, you know, it's late tonight and I just got this today. I think it's terrific what Wendy's done to synthesize a tremendous amount of information in a cohesive way. So I thank you for that. I guess my one observation, without getting into all of the details, is I do see a lot of things listed in you know, FY 24/25 or even FY 25 that are happening in FY 24. So I just think we need to be, you know, and that's some of, so I can come back in more detail and kind of share, you know, what I see those are, some of those things that we are doing and we're gonna do. And you know, if they're not priorities, then, you know, we need to drop them, but they're, for the most part, I mean, one of them, River Road Resiliency Engineering Study. I mean, what did we just talk about tonight? We're gonna cram a huge amount of work just into FY 24 instead of the 2 fiscal years we wanted. And so, you know, there's just some minor adjustments like that.
It was very difficult to answer
It's extremely
some of these because
yeah.
some of them, yeah, as you've already observed, you know, many of them are already, most are already in process.
Yeah.
And we're aware that they're in
Right,
process.
yeah, I know.
So it's like, well, how can I say FY 25? We're doing it right now. So then, you know, and then, you know, there's a bunch of different classes of confusion and how do I answer this? How do I?
Well, some are like 3 in a row on the water, so yeah, they're all important. I think we all just A1, boom.
Yeah, I think the best thing that's gonna come out of this exercise, in addition to ensuring that my efforts and the staff I oversee are aligned with this board's priorities, that's enormously important, but at least as important as that, I think that can come out of this is, you know, the more we can communicate to all of the town and certainly the other boards, commissions and committees, what the priorities are and what we're doing. Is going to be good because I know I get tired of telling people, oh, we don't have time for that. No one wants to hear that, but you can't look at what we're doing. And it's like, what do you think keeps us busy all day, every day? Like there's a million things going on. And I think when people see that, that's when maybe they can be a bit more understanding when their particular project isn't done yet. Because while I think that we've come a long way on that in the last 2 years in particular, there is still, you know, occasionally either a resident or a committee member, or sometimes a committee chair that this becomes very agitated that their particular issue isn't done yet. And to me, I think there's a, you know, if they are made aware of everything we're doing, I think people would be much more understanding that you know, I have to make choices and help my staff make choices every hour of every day of what's the best use of time. And, you know, people have to at some point just trust that we are doing the best we can for the people of this town. And that doesn't mean we get to clear our plate and just do what they want us to do.
So when you put this out, you said, like I said, I don't understand a lot. We said just fill it out, we'll go the first shot and then we'll start talking through them. I mean, to go through all this is a full meeting in itself.
Right, that's, last year we had a meeting on Saturday. to go
Okay,
through it,
that's
so
what I
that
said.
would
We
be-
could do that. You get Angus, is it, because like some of these, I looked at the anomalies and I, obviously, I'm the odd man out on a few of them.
Yeah.
So it's cues and numbers. You guys can sit down and explain things to me and I'll probably change perspective on those quite easily. And then there's others I didn't feel and they're also skewing the numbers. So I think with, some quick conversation, some others with deeper ones. But it is gonna take a lot of to get to a resolution, and then you'll have that list, which you can say to everybody, here it is. That's.
So the ones.
But
that
I
didn't-
will say, not to interrupt, Wendy, but I think we are closer today than we've been in the whole 5 years I've been here. We still have a lot of work to do, Chris. You're totally right. And I think a Saturday, would be a real help, much as none of us want to do that. But I think some investment of time is going to be needed to get us there, but I think we're closer than we've been in the.
We're never gonna get it done on one of these meetings, so that's the problem, so.
Right, no, that's correct. It needs a standalone meeting.
So, I don't recall from your original spreadsheet, but when something was bolded, what's the significance of that? The text is bolded and some have dollar signs after them.
The dollar signs are things that I put in that we've already appropriated money to.
Okay.
Or that there's a grant that's already in place to do it, so, and I'm sure I missed some, but I tried to do that.
Okay, and then the bold.
And then the bold, I think.
Like replace phone systems. Expand land agent role.
I
Does
think,
that mean-
I'd have to look back at whether, I think. Let's see if I can, yeah, I'm not gonna be able to remember just by looking at this, but,
Okay.
and it's possible there was a system that broke down, because I did have an earlier version where I had done things with bolding and underlining and.
It almost looks like these are.
It might be non sequiturs, effective, so, but I'll look back.
Either that or key guy stuff.
Right, it wasn't that, it was, whatever was done intentionally, it just might have not
Yeah.
carried through or something, so.
So Chris, to your point, if you didn't put anything in, that doesn't skew the number. It's just reflect Rick and I. It's not like
No, but
great and zero is not.
But once I have an opinion, it could. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, okay.
This is again, a working document.
All right, so if there are no things we particularly want to discuss, do you want to set a time to go through this and spend a couple of hours?
I just, if I could, just one more observation
Yeah.
that I think is helpful to Chris's question about staff capacity.
Mhm.
As you know, part of this initial thing is, it includes kind of all the columns for which department is kind of lead or support. And in terms of how I envision utilizing this information, it's, once we have it to where it's all kind of where we want it to be, I could run an export of, and in fact, I've done this for a couple of staff just in the last couple of weeks. So for instance, for the conservation agent, I sorted everything by anything that she's either got a lead role in or a support role in, and just truncated it and sent her, like, this is the stuff in my spreadsheet that implicates your time.
Mhm.
And so that's how I would envision using it, is once I have something that's really good and complete and reflective of all of our perspectives, that I can, use that as a management tool to help make sure that department heads know what the priorities are, and know what our objectives are in terms of how they prioritize their work. So there is a tangible end product that I'm hoping to get to.
Mhm.
Understanding it's always going to be a living document and a dynamic situation.
Yeah. I did get an email to the select board email address today, having somebody saw this on the agenda and asking about soldiers and sailors, where that lands, and we're just passing that on. The seems FY 25 was the consensus there. What's that?
I think I had it for that.
That's the average based on. What did you say?
I probably said bury the hatchet quick. Can't find it on here, which one.
Bottom of page 145. If you're looking at individual response.
Yeah, A2.
A2, B2, B2.
That's done. unfortunate that an enormous level of effort had gone toward that.
I know, and
with
then-
Right.
not much to show for it, but it's not been in any way for lack of effort.
Right, we're just kind
But
of.
there is a
stuck now.
point as of last fall where it's kind of like, okay, we're kind of
Yeah.
at a stalemate.
Yeah. All right, so do we want to set a date to work on this? Angus, is Saturday the best day for you? I mean, it's not a great day, but if you were to choose a time that least challenge me,
Yeah, I think that would be best,
do
yeah.
you want to pick a day and then see if we can do it, or?
I think it's gonna be tough this summer, just between some of this stuff kind of bearing down on the, you know, on other, home demands, for Saturdays, so. Well, let me give that some thought,
Okay.
and I'll send something around to the board in the next day or so. I'll see if there's a Saturday that could work in August, or, because I would like to kind of keep momentum on this, because I really think we've made some significant progress in a fairly short amount of time.
Mhm.
Did you sort this by priority too?
I sorted it first by time and then by priority within that, yeah,
But not in the package?
yeah.
Oh, you have a list in here where the priority ones are listed first and.
No, the table here, it's sorted by time frame and priority within that time frame.
Did you go to the start of it, of the sorted version, Rob? Well, the first dozen or maybe more than that, maybe close to 20 or FY 24. And the highest priority is a 1.0.
Good, so it's sorted within a time frame.
Yeah.
And then priority.
By time frame first then.
Thank you, Rick. You know exactly what it was confusing me, thank you. Appreciate it.
Okay.
I was, in her response to my email to the conservation agent this week before I left for vacation, probably a week and a half ago, but in response, he said, that list looks great. Here's my list. I had another 15. So that's the other kind of stage of this, is making sure what I've put together reflects what the department heads themselves and the committees, are all also working on, so.
All right, so the list just doubled.
Yeah.
Okay, you gonna say something?
Oh, no, I was gonna comment, that's what threw me off course. I started out looking at this and I come to a 2.5. I was like, I thought I understood how this worked, and now this doesn't make sense at all. It should be impossible. There's three people in here, to get to a 2.5. But
Yeah, Chris.
then I went and looked at the raw data and I understood it.
Okay, very good. All right, next item. So this is review of the CBA and Affordable Housing Trust Grant Agreement. The select board signs this, so I thought perhaps you would want to take a look at it. This dictates the use of CPA funds transferred to the Affordable Housing Trust. This was originally fashioned off another town's agreement and then went to KP Law, and that also had extensive revision by the two attorneys that were on the CPC. So this is where we landed.
Our town council's been through.
Yes.
Okay. And glazed over.
Yeah, all the accounting is separate. Everything has to be tracked. It's pretty well established. Other towns have similar kind of things.
Seems pretty good.
Right. So then we're ready to sign this. I mean, this is not in final form, but. So none of the CPA funds that have been transferred can be used until this is finalized. So I'm just going to move this along.
Okay.
So I guess to get this, do we need to put it on letterhead, or can it just be on in the format that it's in?
I think,
There's not page numbers on it or anything.
no.
Okay, so.
Yeah, and actually, you may have noticed a lot of the letterhead seems to have been stripped away. I think there's something when they assemble the PDF. If you click the wrong button, it'll replace, when you add the footer, it replaces all of the headers in your entire packet, and you end up with a lot of documents with no letterhead, so.
Okay, yeah, I thought it looked different.
Yeah, there were a few memos that suffered because of that.
Yeah. So if we vote to approve this today, then
I think if you
Your
approve it
office
as the form,
finalize it.
you know,
you
subject
can
to, you know, any scrivener's errors, which I doubt there are any, but.
But we could come in and sign it before that.
Yeah, if you approve it as the form,
Yeah.
and then as long as there's no substantive change, you could just sign it once it's ready for signature.
Okay. Are you comfortable with that?
Very.
Chris? Rick?
Yeah, I am totally. I'm just curious. It sounds like, there's, and I'm not suggesting we delay it all, but it sounds like there's some immediacy, the way you are anxious to get it signed
This has been on my plate for.
for a long
3
time.
months.
Well, I want to get it
Yes,
off
we have the
your plate.
transfer.
I'll make a motion to approve the CPA Affordable Housing Trust Grant Agreement pending getting a letterhead and any final formatting issues.
Second.
All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, minutes. Any comments?
Two changes.
July 10th?
The item D, which is the municipal energy aggregation.
Yeah.
Colonial Power, it's halfway through. Colonial Power will provide additional power to community as needed at a lower rate. He said potentially at a lower rate, there are no guarantees.
Okay.
Item G. Talking about when the select board member says appointed to each board committee. No, it was assigned to
Assigned,
shadow
yeah.
or assist.
Yeah.
Appointing people. with Permission.
Yeah, so I also had some comments on item D. And it was essentially regarding, as I said, this is part of explaining representative, much of the power was temporarily generated locally. Sure, when I changed this from their West Newbury field to the town solar facility. So it was generated locally through the town solar facility. For solar installation to make it. And confirm then confirm that despite this, West Newbury would still be able to participate, would still intend to participate. I think we will.
Anything else?
Okay.
You want to move to?
Yeah, I move that we approve the minutes of July 10th, 2023, as revised.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
This is pretty amazing that we are caught up and things in these minutes reminded me of stuff that we were discussing today.
Right, right.
It's an enormous undertaking by town staff.
Yeah.
Right, so getting the right staffing levels was necessary. We were, you know, underwater.
What?
Underwater distribution.
Okay, Angus, you're.
Angus set himself up for that one.
All right, so actually, so we received the draft distributions study back in March, and just last week while I was out of town, the updated, I believe it's the final draft was received. I found, you know, I haven't read it closely, but there's like, you know, one or two typos or roads misspelled, and there might be those kinds of things.
Yes,
think
I
if
wasn't
there's-
sure if we were supposed to review it.
Well, I guess where I'm going with that is if we have substantive suggestions, we should provide them, and
Okay.
if they're incorporated, great. If they're not,
At least we're on
at least we're on
record.
record. But one of the things I'd like to do that I haven't done, but will do, is take the, I did take a look at the capital project list on page 183 of the packet. And I'm trying to reconcile that with the list of capital projects in our capital program, because some of them are clearly identifiable. Others there's things on that capital program that don't appear here. And there's others that may just be referred to in different ways or batched together in different ways than the phasing that's shown on the capital program. So that's something that really is gonna require some careful analysis, and then bring any questions that I have or we have to the water commission to make sure that if, for instance, there's things listed in our capital program not listed here, is that because this is only covering a certain time frame and those are still future needs, which I expect is the answer, or are those things that maybe aren't important, which I doubt. I suspect it's all got to be done. It's just, but I think it's so important for us as a community to understand the time frame for these capital needs, because right now, in the capital program, it refers to kind of year 1 through 7, and then 7+, which is just a way to say future. And so who knows? I don't know if 7+ is year 8 or year 17, and that's a big difference from a financing standpoint. So I think reconciling this with the capital program and getting updated numbers in the capital program is one of the things I'm most eager to do with this information.
Yeah, the other thing on that table was, the way it's portrayed, it looks like Dole Place is just that one number, where it's actually more complicated than that. And I don't want it to appear anywhere that, that's what it's gonna
They don't have the
cost.
water filtration in. That's
Yeah,
why.
yeah, and also all the distribution system upgrades aren't there, so
Right.
I feel like it's
Exactly right.
misleading.
Well, my conclusion was the number staggering. You total that up, some of the numbers, like the Dole Place was a 2021 value.
Mhm.
When you total up, that's 18 million. You have the filtration in at almost 9 million, that's 27. Put it in today's dollars, you're looking at 30 million plus the cost of land.
Plus the distribution system.
Right, well, that's why I said
Yeah.
I neglected that.
Yeah.
That was,
Yeah,
so, I don't know where the town, I don't know how it happens. It blows my mind. They're looking at 40 million bucks for water.
Yeah.
Can we just buy Poland Springs instead? No, I mean, it's just incredible. Another question on that 8.7 for the filtration. You don't even know if you're gonna need that till you're 6 months down the road using the water.
Right.
That's a crapshoot. That's rolling the dice.
Yeah, it is. But
And at that point, you're in
Yeah,
for
you're
a penny,
already
you're in for a.
Oh, yeah, you're
At that
gonna,
point,
yeah.
you really,
So you gotta bake it in.
yeah, you have to assume you are gonna need to do that.
Yeah, so this was fun reading.
I had some other questions. They talk about the computer model so that we can do our own changes. Is that, they make it sound like we're gonna have access to that and be able to do it. I highly doubt that.
When they make it sound, I thought the
Yeah.
same thing. We can all sit and doodle around on it.
Yeah,
Well, I mean-
for a small fee.
yeah, well, I mean, we kind of say, I think we need to say, can we get that model from you?
Yeah,
And what software do we have to try? There's a learning curve.
yeah. I mean, I just object to the making it sound like it's,
Like it's
just
trivial
being
thing,
plug
yeah,
numbers and
yeah,
doing it for everyone.
Now, this report was just sent in, correct? Yeah.
Yeah.
They're talking about the pipe stave tank will be cleaned in the spring of 2023.
Yeah.
It's in the future. That's actually the past tense, but it's, I just found that odd.
Yeah.
I think that reflects that it was, yeah, it was substantially written, and sent over in March. So I haven't looked at them side by side to see how many changes were made. It may be that they only made whatever changes came from the water commission without, taking the time to really update it for as of the date of the report for August.
So you said that, Mark didn't receive the rate study? today?
So Mark stopped in today. He said, if I understood him correctly, he said they did receive the rate study. He wanted the water commission to have a chance to review it before it was circulated. And he said he expected them to meet Wednesday or Thursday this week. We heard a short time ago it was likely to be Thursday. My understanding is the rate study is going to be a central topic on that agenda. I've been kind of checking all day to see when it was posted, and it's not been posted yet, but that's obviously going to be of real interest, including, you know, whether the commission is inclined to, you know, take some time to digest the rate study. I don't know what to expect. I haven't seen it. That's been past rate studies, but I haven't seen any data how it's done. So are they gonna, you know, look at different options on you know, or how much of the future capital obligation to fill into the, you know, to build into the rates? I can tell you that the last time they amended the rates in the fall of 2018, they had a very short, very cursory meeting with only two commissioners, and with Mike Dutte actually on jury duty. He wasn't in that meeting. And without public notice, they voted 2-0 to change the rates, and they took exactly what was in the consultant's report. That didn't, and they had only received the report a very short time, maybe a couple of days before the posted meeting. It didn't convey to me that the commission had really taken the time to, you know, digest the consultant's work, because you don't want to just take what the consultant says and rubber stamp it. You know, they're the policy setting body. So I'm going to be looking to make sure they're actually deliberating. And while, you know, as much as anyone, I'd like to see them get things to a rate hearing timely, I don't want to see them rush and do that just to get it done. I want to make sure they're really engaging with the study. And if they just received it presumably today, if they're meeting Thursday, I'm just really going to be curious as to how seriously are they taking this.
Yeah, it's not just the rate study, it's all the implications of it, you know, both for capital and water supply and the budget. Yeah, I'm really curious.
Waiting on for
Yeah.
excessive time.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah,
you know, yeah, if the rates don't get increased, we will not be able to set our tax rate.
Right.
So I didn't write, we had talked about writing a memo. I just sent Mark an email and asked him to distribute it to the water commissioners outlining our concerns about that. In the past, every time I write a memo, I get to the meeting and nobody has read it, so it just seemed kind of pointless. So I sent it to Mark and Jody, a copy bomb, and asked them to make sure.
I actually had a conversation, I spoke with Jack today.
You did.
And I explained to him that, you know, we're kind of dead in the water.
Yeah.
You know, financially, you know, we can't, the state, you know, deal or improve the budget if, you know, if we don't have something to substantiate how the water department's going to pay for itself. I have just a real minor point in the study, just something I picked up right at the beginning, but I only mentioned it because it's actually a recurring error. Unless the street is named different than I think.
Bailey's.
Yeah, no, Parsons Road, it says Wellfield number 1 is on Parsons Road. Parsons Road is, you know, serves the subdivision there. And I don't know what the name of the street is that the Wellfields are on, but I don't think that's called Parsons Road.
Not a street.
No, right on the street, right, yeah, it's a driveway, so on page.
It's adjacent.
On page, the page is numbered 163, under Wellfield number 1, it just says that's Parsons Road, so at some point they had to just clean that up. I mean, it may seem trivial, but,
Details on trivial when you're talking about this stuff.
yeah.
Yeah, you know, but I wanted this report. I mean, it's essentially the same report they did
Right.
5 years ago.
Well, yeah, that-
$88,000.
That included for the rate study, but yeah, it was
That
orders of
was
magnitude.
Was in the overall.
Orders of magnitude, it was about 70 grand for the study. And again, a lump sum contract.
Yeah,
They bill based on percent.
I don't know, that needs to
bill
be in
based on
the procurement policy.
any kind of time and materials, any documentation of hours.
Again, that's through the water department.
Yeah.
Correct. Yeah.
Right. Anything else on that? I guess,
No,
I also mentioned,
Yeah.
excuse me, I also mentioned in my email to them about the contracts, that all contracts have to go through the town accountant. You know, until we get the procurement policies, I mean, even when we get the procurement policies.
yeah, and one of the changes we'd like to get, we'd like to have written in a policy is to actually have contracts bear a signature block for the accountant, attesting to the availability of funds. That's very typical in other towns, and that's not. It's been done here on contracts that I'm involved with, but it's not on any of the other department contracts. Nor is the, and you would also like to see a signature block by the chief procurement officer attesting that 30B was complied with. Those two signatures, in my opinion, ought to be on every contract above procurement thresholds.
Any questions on contracts that were there? We got some contracts going there. All right, item P. What do you want to highlight?
Basically, I just threw in a lot of data. This is all working documents. Some of this started back in 2018. Some of it I've kind of kept updated as I go or periodically. And I think, as you know, once we really dig into this kind of water financial study or financial plan, a lot of this data is going to be helpful to that. It's not cohesive, it's not presented in any specific way, but there's a lot of data. And I think, you know, there's some review. You know, a lot of these things, other than my compiling the information, I don't believe that existed previously. Some of these are the types of things I would think that a water department would be producing on its own, but that's not the situation here. So my office is trying to fill in the gap on some of these things, but
some of that stuff is gonna have to also be a little more itemized to be useful.
oh yeah,
Just like we saw it.
yeah, right now it's just kind of raw data.
Yeah, it's raw
But
data.
It's stuff that I hadn't prior to this packet. I've never put it out there.
Right.
So it's just more kind of like, here's a bunch of raw material.
Yeah, right.
So that when we roll our sleeves up, we at least are not
Exactly.
starting with a blank sheet of paper. We've got some interesting data points that.
Yeah.
And it can definitely be, you know, presented in a,
And sometimes those interesting data points lead to more
yeah,
that you have to look into.
no question about it, yeah. So, yeah, I mean, I think, yeah, it was, yeah, actually, this one out here I've got up on the screen, this has always kind of struck me as interesting, because remember what I said a few minutes ago about, you know, the rate increase back in 2018 voted with no apparent scrutiny. And in the subsequent few years, all of a sudden, their water department was generating a lot more money than they needed. And to me, when you read that fall 2018 rate study and some of the clearly erroneous assumptions that it was based on, that was very predictable. And I don't think that's a bad thing in terms of them building up some reserves, but they didn't, it was almost like they did that by accident. They didn't do that on purpose. They did that, in my opinion, through lack of.
Yeah, because that's not with further rate increases, that's just volume increases past that point, right? Where it takes off.
Correct, yeah, so they change rates in. Once,
Yeah.
right around here.
And then for some reason, the volume must have went up, which sometimes can mean they got better meters or something, I mean. You know.
Yeah, the volume.
Well, if your rates don't change, then the only way to get additional revenue is your volume.
Yeah,
Right,
it did
right.
change to those meters.
Yeah, right, so that shows.
Yeah, and in COVID, the usage was a lot more because more people working from home.
But also there were some better meter readings too, because the problem with old meters, they slow down, they don't speed up.
But, you know, it struck me that some of
the feeling.
Yeah.
some of these surpluses, you know, if this had been done as an intentional policy to generate more than you need to put it into reserves, great. But it seems that, you know, it was actually done based on erroneous assumptions on what the operating budget would look like. And for instance, back at that time, this was fall of 2018, they were strongly making the case that a second operator was needed, which I totally agreed with, and a couple of years later, that was added. And I think that was one of the major flaws, whereas rather than changing the rates, once that was done, they changed the rates, started generating all the surplus, and then a couple of years later, not a bad end result. They built up their reserves, so that's not a bad thing. It seemed to me it was done almost by accident and not through the kind of careful financial planning that you would expect. Hope for, I guess it's better.
So do you think all this data was considered by Dana and Howard in their work?
I do, because I had a couple of calls from Steve Dene, and as we were talking, I started sending him all this stuff. So I think he's received all of this. We had a call, I want to say it was like in second week of June. He called me, we talked for about an hour, and as we were talking, I'm like, oh, you need this, and I started sending all this data to him. And then he called me again, maybe 2.5 to 3 weeks ago, and it was more of like a 20-minute call, but I sent him some additional information then. So I made sure he had anything I had on file that I thought might be helpful to him, I provided.
Okay. Well, hopefully the rate study reflects that.
I'll be curious to see
Yeah.
if it does reflect it.
So who's actually doing, do we know who's actually doing the rate study now? The individual?
Well, Steve is the point person, Steve Dene, David Howard. Yeah.
So was he there before?
Yeah, he's been there. Yeah.
So did they take the work inside?
Yes, they did.
They took it inside.
Yeah. Yeah.
But someone at Taylor and Howard.
Yeah. So this was just kind of a data dump for now, but it also is intended to kind of, what we really need, which we've been talking about for 5 or 6 weeks, is we need like a table of contents, which would be really good. Then that would help us to come up with some order as to where we're trying to get to. So they just haven't really good time to do that yet. Next items, town planner report. I've just been including these kind of as a matter of course. They're nice little updates on what the planner is working on. I know this idea of a lands planning summit is, very much a work in progress, and that bears more discussion, probably not at this hour, but
Is it taking a life of its own?
well, I think it's, if it tries to be too much, it will crush under its own weight, and we won't get the value we need. So I think, we've got to find that balance of, can we have an effective, public forum that addresses multiple major issues without diluting the value to each of those initiatives, the MBTA, the corridor, and now the MVP, those are all going to need major public engagement, plus many others, so. I need to continue to work with Sue and Christine and with the boards to see if that's a viable idea, or if we should just let them all go on their own path. And understand that that's going to be a lot of public workshops this fall.
Housing production plan as well.
Yeah.
I have a conflict with the meeting tomorrow, and Sue's gonna record it.
Okay, I'll be there.
And then she also sent around this housing update, I put that in there.
Oh, yeah, the SHI, about 2.5%.
Yeah. So we have 43 units.
These are not the lowest percentage in the state.
Right. West Stockton, 0.
But it did seem the smaller communities had lower percentages.
Yeah.
Also New Ashford, wherever New Ashford is.
Windsor. All the W's.
Yeah. Montgomery, Washington.
Oh, Terry, yeah, it's kind of interesting.
There was something in the news just recently about a lawsuit against the town that has stated that it.
Oh, not gonna do MBTA, yeah.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, just in the last week, it might have been the
I
last.
heard it like
week.
2-3 days ago.
Yeah.
I can't remember
Yeah,
the town.
I'm forgetting what town it was, but the
Holden?
lawsuit was
Could it have been
initiated,
Holden?
I think it was Holden, yeah. Yeah, I'll send the link around, but it was initiated by, a local or regional nonprofit, housing nonprofit, as well as, I believe, a local resident, both initiated the lawsuit. And there was a couple of comments in the article I read from the Attorney General. And that, you know, just indicating that people are gonna look at this as a bellwether and the town.
Well, she was actually pushing that as a
Yeah,
possible outcome, so.
Yeah.
She, you know, it wouldn't surprise me if she didn't have a hand in it.
wouldn't surprise anyone. One, just quick update on a project not listed, but, you know, the general updates, just, work is really going very, very, nicely with the paid school study. They've been into the school, they've got another day, next Tuesday, they're getting into the children's chapel as well, but they're really doing everything we hired them to do, so that work is kind of going along in the background.
Anything else? Just an update from the select board email, there's been correspondence about truck traffic on Bridge and Church Street. A lot of trucks with their like modified exhaust systems, just really loud. One of the residents did a video of it with a decibel sound reading, and it's a huge difference. So I reached out to Mike Dwyer, and he's had patrols in the area, but there's not much we can do. It's a DOT kind of enforcement, you know, CDL. But I happened to be home a couple of days last week, and it's like two trucks every 15 minutes all day long down Bridge Street over the bridge.
This is a pickup truck.
No, this is DOT vehicles, dump trucks.
Oh.
I don't know where they're going, but it's, you know, this resident has been clocking the traffic. It's, yeah, it's a bridge open. It's been nonstop. So just
But
making you
they're
aware.
MassDOT vehicles.
They're DOT, but yeah, over 10,000 pounds.
Oh, I see, okay.
No, not
Okay,
DOT.
the size. Okay.
The size, yeah. So the police department's aware of it. I mean, he parked his cruiser around something. And
A couple of weeks, someone hit the bridge and take it out and bump up break.
so just so you're aware.
Surprised you don't get complaints about the boat on the river Saturday and Sunday night.
You know, it's so loud.
It hurts me up at my house.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Yeah. I forget it, well, why people are so into making loud noise.
It's still being recorded, so almost fun.
Yeah.
All right, other, any items for future agendas? We're gonna look at setting up a time for our priorities. Anything else? We have a long list of things.
Yeah, I do have a running list, but, if there's anything
Anything
new, I
hasn't
can
been
make sure it's
stuck
on that list.
No?
Nothing that I want to bring up today.
All right.
I don't want anything added to any.
All right, at least we didn't go past the limit.
What's the next meeting? What is it?
2 weeks.
2 weeks.
Yeah.
2 weeks.
Is this a moving limit? I thought Chris or somebody had said a limit of 9:30 at one
It's
point.
at 10, but this, I
The
saw the
first couple
agenda,
meetings that we did,
Yeah.
but
and then you're falling apart on me when you,
Just like back to the good old days.
no, it's not. It's
this
not
is
the
it's
next day.
impossible to do much quicker.
Wait till Wendy hits midnight.
I've already checked out, I'm just sitting, still.
Not gonna happen.
Motion
right.
adjourned.
Getting adjourned.
Thank you.